The Committee on Licenses and Inspections will be called to order, having established a quorum. To my far left, Vice Chairman Alan Dom. To my next left is Councilman Greenlee, and to my right, Councilman Mark Squilla. Will the clerk read the title of the bills to be heard today? That's a 9992. For the record, Bill number 180107, the commercial establishments on residential block faces, is being held at the request of the bill sponsor.
Bill number 171112, an ordinance amending portions of Title IV, Subcode F, the Philadelphia Code, to establish inspections and certification requirements for all smoke control systems and smoke and fire dampers in limited occupancies, and amending the periodic testing requirements of fire protection systems. Bill number 180700, an ordinance amending Subcode A of the Administrative Code of Title IV, the Philadelphia Building Construction Occupancy Code of the Philadelphia Code by amending Section A703, entitled Special Certificate of Inspection, to provide for lead paint requirements for educational occupancies. Bill number 180745, an ordinance amending Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code by amending Subcode B and Subcode F to add sections requiring fire sprinklers in portions of certain buildings. Bill number 180746, an ordinance amending Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code by amending Subcode PM to amend provisions relating to periodic inspections of piers and other waterfront structures. Bill number 180953, an ordinance amending Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, Subcode R, entitled the Residential Code, by amending the 2015 edition of International Residential Code as adopted by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Subcode EC, entitled the Philadelphia Energy Conservation Code, by adding amendments adopted by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and Subcode P, entitled the Philadelphia Plumbing Code, to allow for technical amendments to be made by regulation, all to conform with the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code. Bill number 180992, an ordinance amending Chapter 9-3900 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Property Licenses and Owner Accountability. Bill number 181008, an ordinance amending Subcode A of Title IV of the Philadelphia Code by amending Section A-703, Special Certificate of Inspection, to enhance building safety requirements for educational occupancies.
Thank you. Before we begin with our first panel on Bill number 180700, the chair recognizes this bill's sponsor, Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to thank everybody who participated on this. It was a good working collaboration effort through the school district, the Health Commission, and through Healthy Schools and through the PFT, to come up with a way to make it safe for lead in our schools, and to put something into, to codify the ideas both of the school district, the health department, and the Healthy Schools Coalition into writing, so that we could all feel that this process will make it safer for everybody in the schools of the city of Philadelphia. So thank you so much for all your participation, and appreciated everyone's input and guidance on this process.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to ask Dr. Thomas Farley, Danielle Floyd, and Colleen Bowen, I believe, because she has to leave, the principal needs to leave. For the record, we have written testimony by Natalie Caton St. Louis and Tammy Thomas that will be added for the record. After this panel, we're going to ask for Dr. Marilyn Hayworth, Laurie Mazer, and Jerry Roseman to join us. You may proceed, Dr. Farley.
All right, good afternoon, Chairwoman Quinona Sanchez and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. I'm Dr. Thomas Farley, Health Commissioner for Philadelphia. Thank you for allowing me to testify on Bill number 180700 as amended. This bill would require any educational facility serving children and built before 1978 to be inspected by a certified lead inspector to ensure that it is safe from hazards of lead-containing paint. As you know, exposure to lead paint and dust from deteriorated paint can cause learning and behavior problems in children. While we believe that most exposure to lead paint and paint dust occurs in homes, there is some amount of risk in any building that has lead-containing paint on the walls, including schools and daycare centers. Younger children who are more likely to put their hands in their mouths are at greater risk of lead dust than older children. For this reason, schools and other educational facilities that were built before 1978 should assure that the paint is not deteriorated. Bill number 180700 requires a certified lead inspector conduct an annual inspection for deteriorated paint as part of the special certificate of inspection. We believe this could help prevent Philadelphia's children from being exposed to lead. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
We'll let Danielle, and then if there's any questions.
It's on. Good afternoon, members of City Council and members of the public. For the record, my name is Danielle Floyd, and I serve as the Chief Operating Officer for the School District of Philadelphia. I'm going to go through just a set of slides to provide you with a general overview of our lead paint stabilization program. I provided a hard copy of my testimony, and I'm also joined here by Principal Colleen Bowen, who is at the Clara Barton School, which is a school that was recently completed under this program. So when we, as some of you may remember, we were here almost a year ago. I testified in front of City Council with regards to the work that we were doing around lead paint stabilization, and at that time committed to both members of council and members of the public that the district would do a better job when it came to our paint stabilization program, and committed to being more inclusive and cross-functional and in making sure that stakeholders were involved in that work. As part of this program that we've established, we're looking to, as Dr. Farley also mentioned, minimize exposure to peeling, flaking, and crumbling paint that is presumed to contain lead in our schools. We are also looking to follow and making sure that we're following the safe work practices and testing protocols that have been established by the U.S. EPA to confirm that the spaces that are stabilized are free of lead dust and debris. Certainly, we want to make sure that the grant monies that we received from Governor Wolf and members of the Pennsylvania State Delegation are being used responsibly, as well as the district funds that are allocated to support this project. And then finally, utilizing lessons learned to inform our project protocol and work practices so that this is an ongoing process to make sure that as we're working through additional schools, that we're using those lessons learned to inform our work. So I'm happy to report to members of council that to date we've completed 8 schools as part of this program with over 3,000 students who are learning in spaces that are freshly painted and in areas that have been minimized in terms of their exposure to flaking paint and debris. We've had over 1,100 assessment hours already completed by our environmental consultants in the first 46 schools to document damage that are in our buildings with a level of detail. And to date have spent $2.8 million of the state grant funds that have been received on this project. One of the things that, as I mentioned, referenced before in my comments, is that this is really a team effort. We're looking to establish ourselves as sort of best in class and as a model for other districts across the country who are dealing with similar challenges with regards to their facilities. And one of the things that we did as part of this work was to establish an advisory group to provide project oversight, to assist us with outreach and communication with our parents and building stakeholders, to share their technical guidance and expertise around best practices, and to advocate for the additional funding that we know we will need in order to get this work done. I'm pleased to share that many of the members of the advisory group are actually joining us today, and I just want to publicly thank them for their time and their efforts and their passion around this work and for being great thought partners with the school district. I would also mention that it's a cross-functional group of our labor partners, advocacy organizations, and parents that make up the advisory group. So we've identified 46 schools initially for our first phase of paint stabilization, but to be clear, we know that there are likely more schools that are in need of this work. We have 34 elementary, 4 middle schools, and 8 high schools, and you'll see they are distributed across the city with regards to the areas that we've identified for this project. Right now, we're projecting between 12 to 18 months to complete all of that work. And we are doing that work in two ways. One, through a set of our internal painters and plasterers that are employed within our maintenance department. And then we also have a set of qualified contractors that we're using to provide these services as well. And working in close collaboration with our labor partners, with our education advocates, parents, and members of the Philadelphia Healthy Schools Coalition, we've identified a 5-step process that all schools go through when they're starting this project, from the identification and sharing with schools why were they identified for this project, all the way through a very detailed testing protocol, as well as a pre-clean and post-clean of spaces before we return them back to use by those who are in the school for occupancy. Just sharing with you a couple of pictures and photos of some of the projects that we've done. The George Deppinger School was one of the first schools that we started back in the spring. And then, as you'll hear from Principal Bowen, Clara Barton was one of the schools that we recently completed a few weeks ago. But again, creating these welcoming, safe and learning environments for our students and our families is of utmost importance. One of the forms of testimony that you heard during the hearing that occurred last January was specifically focused on the district's, our need to improve how we communicate on this project. And so as part of this work, we have set up a very detailed communications protocol. Prior to the start of the work, we contact the school principal to let them know that we plan to begin. We send letters home. We translate them into the home languages of those students to make sure that language is not a barrier to making sure that families are aware of this work is occurring. We have met with school staff. We're joined by PFT in those meetings with the school building staff to let them know that this work is planned and what they need to do. And then we're also hosting a series of kickoff meetings that are open to the broader school community. So before anything starts, we're doing a lot of outreach to make sure that people are aware and know, and also leaving information available in each of the school's main office so that families can access at their leisure. When the project begins, there's a weekly email that has a schedule for work. Principals, building representatives, as well as parents are included on that. So everybody, again, is the best that we can do to make sure we're in rooms 104, 105, 106. That information is shared on a weekly basis. And then finally, at the conclusion of projects, we are sending letters home, notifying teachers, as well as leaving a detailed report at each one of the schools so that parents can come at the leisure again to be able to read about what occurred. We've also established a project website where we've posted a number of resources and information that talk about the work that we're doing. We've established a project team email so that questions that come to our staff, we can respond in a quick and responsible way. And then certainly have established use our phones as a means to also answer questions. The last thing that I would share is that this bill both presents an opportunity for us to build on the program that we've established, but I would be remiss if I didn't state that there's certainly future opportunities and lessons learned just from the work that we've done to date. The first being that communication and coordination on this, if you can imagine, it's very disruptive to a school. And so communication and coordination around this is really key and integral to the project success. That is something we've learned and experienced at every one of the projects that we've worked on. That there's still opportunity that as a district we need to do a better job of setting expectations around frequency of cleaning, which also is referenced specifically in the bill, and making sure that we provide multiple forms of training to our staff, bringing them in, providing it online, and that it needs to be repetitive. We can't just assume that the first time is the time that it will stick. And that we need to make sure that all building occupants are very clear about what the work expectations are and frequency of this program. Something that has also come up as part of this is that for schools where we're not working right now, there may be a hazard that is presented to children, and so how do we start to think through an interim solution to addressing those areas to make sure that they're stabilized and at least mitigate the hazard prior to starting work at a later date. I would also share that what we've learned as part of our advisory group and in our conversations is that we don't actually fully know the totality of the risk until all of our facilities are assessed. And so, as you heard me mention before, we have 46 schools that have been identified, but we certainly know that we have over 206 buildings that were built prior to 1978. So that gives you the magnitude of work that still remains in terms of identifying those schools and prioritizing work so that we're addressing the schools with the greatest need. One of the other recommendations that came through our advisory group was finding an opportunity to debrief with those schools that have gone through the program so that we can hear directly from them about their experiences and what their lessons learned, again, to help inform our work practices at future sites. And then finally, that this is a project that will cost money. It's not just for the assessment work that needs to be done, for the stabilization work. You've heard our superintendent speak about this, and we've also briefed members of council about the district's $4.5 billion outstanding deferred maintenance when it comes to our facilities. And so, we're addressing a number of the issues within the building, but there's still attention that's required to beginning to look at some of the root causes, whether that's roofs that need to be replaced, windows that need to be replaced, so on and so forth. But I do hope that I leave members of council with a higher degree of confidence in terms of the work that we're doing, the collaboration that we have set in place around this work, and at the end, what we're doing to make sure that our students and our staff are safe when students are reporting on a daily basis. I'd like to introduce Colleen Bowen so you can hear a firsthand account of the work that was done at the Clara Barton Elementary School. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, the chair for the record wants to recognize that Councilman Kenyatta Johnson is here and Councilman Alfred Tollenberger. We're going to hear her testimony. Alfred. I used to confuse him for Alan, and he corrected me. I get it right. Okay. And then we'll take questions to the panel. Especially when they're together, I want to make sure. Thank you. You may proceed, and welcome so very much. This is one of my schools, so very happy to have you here today.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Keelan Santos and the members of the Licensing and Inspection Committee. I am Colleen Bowen, the proud principal of Clara Barton Elementary School in the School District of Philadelphia, and I'm here to provide testimony on the lead paint removal project that occurred in my school this year. I will talk about how the project affected my school community and the communication process between the school district, myself, my families, and my staff. I was notified on July 13th of the school district's plan for Clara Barton to be part of the lead removal project due to our vulnerable population. Clara Barton is the only kindergarten through second grade school in the district with over 700 students and one autistic support class. Following my notification, several representatives from the district and the contracted company that came to my school to conduct a walkthrough with myself and my building engineer, discussing the work that needed to be completed. They were working from a school district created needs report that was comprehensive and involved every part of my school. The school district liaison, James Hill, was in communication with me right from the beginning and heard my concerns about the start of the school timeline. School was opening on August 27th, was the earliest opening in my recollection, and I wanted to make sure all classrooms and student common areas were completed by that point, giving the contractors a 3-week turnaround time. He worked closely with the contractors to keep them on pace. In the end, all 25 of Barton's classrooms, the hallways, the bathrooms, and the 2 cafeterias were completed by August 20th, a week earlier than expected. From that point on, they worked on location on areas that were not crucial to the start of school and where the students can be relocated. I received daily and weekly updates on the project from Mr. Hill via emails, phone calls, and school visits during detailing the work that was being done on the project's progress. If any concerns or problems arose, he handled them immediately and with efficiency. The communication with my school community and staff was just as efficient. Danielle Floyd and her team, along with the Healthy School Committee, came out. Well, first Danielle Floyd and her team held a meeting with all the principals and building engineers on July 24th to give us an overview of the process. Then Mrs. Floyd and her team came out to Barton School to talk to the community and the school advisory committee on July 27th to discuss the project before it started, in essence, to ask permission from the families to do this project. And address any concerns they may have had. And the Healthy School Committee was there as well. The team came out a third time on back to school night to speak with the parents, and they had a table set up for questions. And then finally, the team also came out on August 21st to address concerns with my staff. And a team of about 10 people came to talk with them. And finally, the team came out to another Barton SAC team meeting. Well, when this was written, it was the week before, to continue the conversation and address any questions or concerns they would have had. They were very, very open with them and open to any questions that they had. I'm very happy to say that Barton is done with our project, that all problem areas have been replastered and repainted. Any chips or uneven surfaces were addressed, and our vulnerable students are in a safer environment as a result. We're very thrilled to be part of this project right from the get-go, and we were overjoyed that it was able to get done mostly before school started. As in an early childhood setting, our classroom environment and creating a welcoming, open environment was really important to us. There was very limited disruption to my educational program, and very clear and specific guidelines and precautions were taken into place to ensure everybody's safety during the process. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman, did you have a question for her?
No.
For the panel. Real quickly, just, one of the things is we're working through all these healthy school initiatives. You seem to be pretty pleased about your process, but from a more proactively, what do you think moving forward, lessons learned about what you think should be happening in the summer so that it doesn't get to this point? As a principal, what have you seen? Were there requests for building issues that didn't get taken care of? What would you like to see the district do moving forward?
Honestly, I would like more proactive movements with the work orders. More fine tuning, and forgive me, but more fine tuning of the facilities department.
We're talking long term.
There's a little bit, although communication was excellent with the program, the communication between the departments is a little not as efficient, and some more work with that can definitely be addressed. There were many things that, as the teams were walking through the building, they were able to fix things for me or get things fixed for me quickly because the head people were walking through, and it shouldn't be that way. You should just be able to get things fixed not because you know somebody, again, I'm sorry, but because they need to be done.
Big girl.
She's so awesome, though. I don't want her to think anything, but I mean, you should be able to get things fixed because they need to be fixed, and it's not a safe environment for your students, and I don't feel that always happens. But.
Well, we thank you, and we thank you for your cooperation.
Yeah.
I'm now going to take, I know you had to go, so I want to make sure I get you out the door if you need to go out. Get back to the...
Thanks, dismissal, I really need to be there. So.
Get back to Feltonville, go ahead. But the panel does have some questions for both Danielle and Dr. Farley. Let me start real quickly before I turn it over to the bill sponsor, Squilla. So Danielle, we've been talking a little bit around this building situation, and I know part of the discussion was, at the city, we've built a capital group internally through the Public Property Department and at the Recs Department. Is this something, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to talk to Bridget about figuring out, can we build a more experienced team internally at the school district so those walkthroughs that the principal alluded to can happen, where you kind of have a cross section of building engineers and experience to look at this? How far away are you from potentially building that? Is that something for next year that we'd like to see in?
I would say our immediate focus right now with the work, one, I actually agree with Principal Bowen. I mean, we should just have a set of expectations that goes throughout the organization in terms of what we prioritize to get done in schools. And so I'm okay with the fact that she said it. It's something that we have to deal with. I I think for us, one of the most immediate things that we need to do right now is really focus on the training of our staff. We have such a wide range of experience when we have people who've been engineers for less than 2 years and some who've been engineers for over 30. And you can go into different places and things are done in a very different kind of way. And until we set up, I think, a set of expectations around, what's routine, what does good preventative maintenance look like, what are those checks supposed to be, what do we mean when we say curb appeal, that we're not going to get to a different place and we're not going to move into organization until we get to that point. We are working very closely right now with SEIU 32BJ around expanding opportunities for training for our staff, both internally as a district, but also using the resources within the union so that our staff can take advantage of those. But I agree with you that there's opportunity, I think, both on the bigger conversation we're having around buildings and where they should be and how we're building and how we can sync up, which was part of the task force legislation that was previously introduced, and we're moving in that direction. I would say more locally, our focus this year is setting expectations, training, and then following through. So, when you ask a question, whether it's me or someone else, how do we know that it got done? People can communicate with a degree of confidence. I just think, in full transparency, we're not quite there yet.
As part of, again, we're spending quite a bit of money investing in school buildings as a result of all of these discussions. Do you have a pretty modern work-based system?
We do on the, so we have a comprehensive system that we use called Archibus, which is intended to be our central, essentially, operations data warehouse for all information related to a building. It started with our work order system. It will expand to include environmental data, all of our certifications for boilers, for elevators. So the intent is for it to be a single location that people on our team can go to be able to pull information about a building. And
that's fully operational right now?
Our work order system is fully operational. The environmental module is under development. Okay. We have things that are in various stages of development. I would say the most robust is the work order system with a number of different modules, our inventory of equipment in various stages of either pre-development, development, testing, or execution.
Okay. I guess one of the things as you're building out that module is what are potential building requests that may lead to other things, right? What's the entree point for, chip paint that could lead to something else and looking at that. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do want to thank Danielle, Dr. Farley, for their offices participating in this process. And Danielle, thank you personally for being accessible to help out with this. And to follow up on what Maria's saying, I was the same thought. We talked about they did hire additional painters in the district.
We did.
And then we spoke about during the process of these meetings about not only the engineers' training, but even the cleaning people to make sure they're trained in what they need to do. Is there going to be an increase in people being hired for that cleaning positions?
So I don't want to preclude myself. We have on Thursday at our Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, we are going to be presenting a recommendation to the Board of Education for us to bring on an additional 36 cleaners and an additional 14 custodial assistants. By bringing those individuals on, that would allow us at buildings that are larger to have that redundancy in terms of two custodial assistants at our large facilities that require it. It would also allow us to develop what's called a roving crew, and so they wouldn't be building based. They would allow us to triage schools that if they have a large amount of absences that day, something occurred the night before, but it's a way to help augment the additional staff that is on site to be able to help with cleaning and or just doing those extra things to create the appeal that when families come into the school, it looks more welcoming and inviting, and especially during this time of the year, it starts to look a bit worn. And so it would be 36 additional general cleaners that we would assign to schools with the highest need, 14 additional custodial assistants to provide redundancy at our large facilities, and 12 individuals that we would be bringing on in a roving crew, with the goal to expand that to have 4 roving crews for next year. And that would be in addition to the 10 painters, to your point that you referenced before, that we're also bringing on to have a 3rd crew available to provide paint stabilization work.
And I think that's great, and obviously you mentioned the training part for how when we try to codify the language into the safety issues and the concerns, to look at that in a way that, all right, these are our protocols, this is what we're supposed to be doing, so hopefully we could get to those things in the timely manner, so that even if we can't get to the major work is done, we could keep it clean.
Correct.
Until we get to that major work. And I think that's the most important part. And so thank you so much for your efforts and participation in the process.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Councilman Squilla, for this bill. I just had a few quick questions. Do we have any idea of how long it's going to take to do these inspections over the 224 schools, and what the potential cost might be? And that's, I guess, the first question.
Sure. I'll answer the second question first. We are estimating that each assessment will be approximately $5,000 to complete. We have 46 schools that were already assessed, so there's 206 additional schools that we need to assess. Some of this is going to be dependent on consultant availability to be able to complete this work, but we're estimating it's going to take us a year to get the remaining done.
1 year.
Correct.
As you said, 5,000 per school?
That's correct.
That doesn't address the remediation if anything's required.
That is correct.
Do you have any idea, I know you guys did a report a year and a half ago, you did an assessment of all the schools. Would that report have information as to what we're looking for here in this inspection?
It would not. It would have information around root cause, what may have contributed to the appearance of peeling paint and plaster in a building. So the FCA would point to needed roof replacements, needed window replacements, exterior door replacements. It would not specifically point to this. We use our HERA inspections, which are a 2-year, every 6 months we go in to document asbestos-containing materials in schools. As part of that walkthrough, those HERA inspectors are documenting and screening for damaged paint and plaster, but the work that we have done is far more detailed as part of this program, but we at least have that initial screen through the HERA inspections, not through our FCA.
I have a general question. If you're a teacher in a school, you see a problem, is the responsibility reported to the principal, and then the principal reports it to the maintenance people?
It would be, the protocol would be for that teacher to report it to the principal or their building engineer. The building engineer has the ability to create a work order. We also, in the event of emergency, we'll have people contact our environmental office directly. And I would also share that we get reports of damage through our partnership with the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers. So we get the information a couple different ways. The formal way is to put in a work order, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we do have multiple ways that information comes to us about this.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Danielle, I know for purposes of time, because I don't want to keep you here, you were going to comment, and I know we got written testimony. I just saw Councilman Green walk in the door about 1810008. Did you briefly want to make a comment, and that way I don't have to hold you up? Dr. Farley, we have something in writing, and for the record.
Yes, sure. I think that what we are committed as a district to replicating the best practices that were established in our lead paint program, and are committing to establishing that for asbestos asbestos in schools and mold in schools. I think I think there's additional conversation that should really be had, both I think around the cost implications for that piece of it, as well as the construct for, do we build upon the existing group that we have and add to it, or do we want to set up something slightly different in terms of how we move in that way. But I think that we have established something here that is, I do truly believe, is a best practice, and it would be in our best interest to figure out how do we build upon that to expand that to other environmental hazards that we've heard from the public are of equal concern with regards to children and staff being safe in those facilities.
Okay, we appreciate it. I know later on we will be taking testimony on the bill, but I wanted to make sure that I could release you if you had to go.
I'll be here.
There being no other questions from this panel, as I mentioned earlier, we had written testimony, and then the next panel should include Dr. Marilyn Howarth, Laurie Mazer, and Jerry Roseman. Then after that, we have Nicole Giorgenti and Don Anticoli and Mads Lee.
Somebody from via lead testifying, or you have that via lead?
Mm-hmm. Mads Lee, yeah. Okay. Dr. Marilyn, you want to get started? Thank you. Your name for the record.
Yes. I'm Dr. Marilyn Howarth. I am an occupational and environmental medicine physician with the Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology at the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine. And I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to submit these comments on the proposed changes to the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, specifically Bill 18077. Our center, the seat, is the only environmental health core center funded by the NIEHS in Pennsylvania. And as such, our researchers, physicians, and public health professionals work every day on environmental health issues and recognize the value of quality scientific discovery to the establishment and maintenance of good public policy. As the technical advisor and health advisor to the Philadelphia Healthy Schools Initiative, I'd like to offer the following comments on the proposed legislation. Lead exposure to young children causes serious health, educational, and behavioral consequences, as we all know. Although the percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels has declined in recent years in Philadelphia, it has not kept up with national trends. And in fact, our blood lead elevation rate in Philadelphia currently among young children is nearly twice what Flint, Michigan experienced at the height of their water crisis. And why is this? Because our children in Philadelphia have multiple sources of exposure. And that's why I'm here to speak today on behalf of this very important legislation, because the elimination of all of these sources is really critically important for their health. To start, the combined sources of paint, water, and soil create a backdrop that mean that even a small contribution in schools is really relevant. I really appreciated the school district's comments on what they have done so far, and I think this bill will serve to codify those very important best practices that we saw them talk about. There have not been studies in schools that directly evaluate the contribution of lead dust or lead paint chips exposure on children. We therefore are left to extrapolate from existing studies of dust exposure by using risk assessment strategies that the EPA uses standardly. And when we look at that, we find that in 2001, the EPA established a house dust floor dust standard of 40 micrograms per square foot that they felt would keep children from having elevated blood lead levels over 10. Since that time, we have determined that 10 is not adequate to protect children. And in fact, the EPA has just this summer, July 2nd of 2018, come out with a much lower standard of 10 on floors for dust. And what's very important to note is that not only did they say that was the safe level of dust in homes, they were very specific about that being applicable to elementary and secondary schools, a comment that they had not made explicitly enough in their earlier legislation. So based on the science, based on the EPA's own recommendations, these are the safe levels that are currently recommended. What we found, according to some studies that have been done by the Philadelphia Healthy Schools Initiative, is that dust in some schools are currently as high as 1,400 micrograms, not 10 or 20, 1,400 in some places, thus clarifying the need for this kind of remediation. Based on my training as an occupational and environmental medicine physician, extensive experience in the...
Dr. Marilyn, we
Yes.
have your full testimony. For purposes of time, I'm going to ask you if you can please highlight your biggest points so we can get through it. We
Great.
appreciate it. All of it will be put on the record. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the key points are that we support the certificate of inspection for every school, and it should be both secondary and elementary. We support the transparency of the bill because we believe that parents have the right to know when inspections and when remediation will be done, and they deserve to know when that when things are completed. We also recognize that the scope of the lead stabilization and remediation will take quite a lot of time. And we recognize that in the meantime, children need to be protected. So the daily wet dusting and HEPA vacuuming in every school where lead is available and peeling for children is so essential, because by eliminating that dust, we can actually reduce exposure as we wait for the remediation efforts to continue. We also support the within a reasonable time frame, having exposure mitigation or remediation. That would be within the 48-hour time frame. And we do support the Philadelphia Department of Public Health's appropriate role in this measure in terms of inspection, and hope that you provide them the resources that will be necessary in order to complete this. Just in one sentence summary, the exposure to children is real, it is substantial. We believe that it is robbing children, stealing their IQ and cognitive function, and we believe that every Philadelphian deserves the right to have full cognitive development and not be impaired. We also believe that this bill will go a long way to diminish the opportunity to really dumb down Philadelphia children, which is really, unfortunately, what is happening to all of those exposed to lead. Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify today at today's really important hearing. My name is Lori Mazer, and I'm a parent of a kindergartner and a third grader at Jackson Elementary in South Philadelphia, which is one of our wonderful public schools. I'm on the leadership team of both the Philly Healthy Schools Initiative and of Parents United for Public Education. And just as a bit of background, I was introduced to the work that Philly Healthy Schools Initiative does when our school, Andrew Jackson, became one of the first schools to undergo lead abatement work by the school district. The process of lead abatement at our school, I think you all have heard me testify about it before. It was very challenging and required a huge amount of back and forth with the school district, our parent group, and our principal, and invaluable help from the Philly Healthy School Initiative. And that work has finally been completed, and I'm thrilled to hear that there's been progress made, and I've actually been part of the lead task force and trying to make things better as we go forward from at least a communication and notification standard. But to call this work complete would be a total misnomer, and that's why I'm here to testify before City Council in support of this bill. It's incredibly urgent that we tackle the lead in our schools as quickly and aggressively as possible. The scale of the problem is enormous. Philadelphia has these amazing, beautiful old buildings that we built for our children and our teachers and staff to educate them. But the majority of those buildings, 90% of them, were built prior to 1978, which means they need a lot of maintenance, and it also means that the likelihood that they contain lead paint is very high. So we haven't done enough to maintain these buildings, due in part to large amounts of budget cuts and challenges. But that lack of maintenance has led to flaking paint and environmental health risks from water intrusion, including mold, and I won't even get into asbestos. And so while the chipping and flaking paint may have been abated at our school, there's major work to be done. Most importantly, to address the number of other schools in Philadelphia that suffer from similar or worse conditions. 8 out of 224 were slowly chipping away at this number, but I think, as folks have been stressing, it's incredibly important that this bill codify both the notification and then the cleaning practices that we will use prior to being able to tackle all of these schools. So it's really important to keep any dust and paint chips away from our students and to protect them from the incredibly harmful effects of lead exposure, which is what Marilyn's just outlined, while school await abatement work. When I first began learning about lead paint in our schools, it was painfully hard to get accurate information, and the protocols for parent notification had not yet been drafted. It is vitally important that we pass this legislation so that other parents and school communities will be informed and aware about the potential hazards and what is being done to combat them. We can't stress enough how important this communication piece is and understanding the progress that we're making is. So this bill, bill number 180700, calls for better assessment of damaged lead paint in our schools, better transparency about the conditions and dangers from lead paint and dust, and increased public notification about upcoming inspections and also the findings, right? We can't just tell parents we're doing something and then not have the follow-up. We need to tell people what's actually been done. And so given this, the bill does a lot to make sure that the lessons we have learned in the past year at schools like Jackson and Nebinger would not be lost in vain, and that the district will do a much better job of protecting our vulnerable students all across the city. It's particularly important that the bill requires that classrooms and schools be certified as lead safe or else restricted for use and stabilized. We can't continue to pretend that this isn't a risk and that we're not letting people know that it's out there. We need to be really upfront about that. So I really commend you and thank you for taking on this issue, and I would ask that we keep in our minds that our children and teachers deserve really prompt action on not only lead, but other hazardous materials. I don't want to start showing up about every hazardous material, like if we could kind of deal with the fact that our school facilities need urgent help in general. So no parent should have to worry about the safety of their child from known hazards in their classroom. And it's gobsmacking. It's literally the bare minimum we can offer our students is that their school facilities don't harm them, right? That seems like the bare minimum, and I feel like we deserve that, and all of our students deserve that. So thank you.
Thank you. I can assure you that those of us who have to add resources to the district are extremely committed about working smart around this issue
No, I really
for the
appreciate
safety
it.
of the
Thank you.
children.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Roseman?
My name is Jerry Roseman, and I have the privilege of working with the PFT as their Director of Environmental Science and with the Philly Healthy Schools Initiative and Coalition as an Environmental Science Advisor. Thank you so much, Councilwoman Sanchez, and special thanks to Councilman Squilla for all the work that he's done on this bill, which I also think is quite important in helping to protect students and staff in all of our schools. My work for the PFT has me going into schools on an almost daily basis. And when I do that, I get to see the conditions that are being faced in the buildings. I do these inspections with the school district's environmental people in a side-by-side manner. And so I have been able to work in cooperation with them for a long time. And on the lead approach that we're currently engaged in, the opportunity of working with the school district leadership has also been very positive. A major shared concern that we've had for quite some time is related to the hazard posed by lead dust exposures from crumbling lead, painted ceilings, walls, windows, and other surfaces. Excuse me. Last year, when a first grader at Conley Elementary School was found to have an excessively elevated blood lead level that was associated with chipping and peeling lead paint in his classroom, we recognized the real impact of these conditions. We also came to understand that as bad as the conditions were at Conley, there were many other schools that were as badly damaged and even in worse condition. And especially alarming was this thing that we all know, that how vulnerable children are to the impacts of lead. So an immediate and robust response was required. The PFT, the Philly Healthy Schools Coalition partners, including the parent stakeholders and advocacy groups, engaged in discussion with district leaders to develop a comprehensive approach to the lead dust exposure problems we were seeing. We also worked with State Senator Vincent Hughes' office to develop an urgent critical response plan for our schools, and the state provided more than $7.5 million to help fund needed lead stabilization and cleanup work in about 45 schools. While that's a great start, there's much more that's still needed. To guide and direct the lead paint-related cleanup work, the school district leadership agreed to establish a lead paint and plaster stabilization project advisory group. That advisory group includes representatives of the teachers and educational staff, maintenance and custodial workers, and administrative principals unions, in addition to parents and environmental advocates, and participation by the state senator, Vincent Hughes' office. We've worked together over the past 6 months to develop best practice approaches with the district for lead stabilization and cleanup, to increase data and information sharing, improve transparency and communication, and to upgrade testing and verification of the cleanup actions taken. The district leaders and stakeholder advisory group members have all agreed that the effort has been working quite well, but we also agree that much more is needed now. More schools than the 45 currently in the program and literally hundreds of educational spaces have damaged lead paint and lead dust, chips on the floors, windows, and other classroom surfaces that have to be cleaned up now and on an everyday basis while this stabilization work is being conducted. We urgently need better solutions to more quickly and comprehensively respond to the dangerous conditions that we see in the schools on a regular basis. The bill is drafted by Councilman Squilla further extends coverage to all schools where there is a potential for lead paint exposure to occur. It establishes specific rules requiring comprehensive evaluation and determination of lead safety, and it requires immediate response actions, including the cleanup of lead dust from surfaces, also isolating damaged lead painted surfaces that have to be undertaken where they can they're in contact with children. The bill also supports the need for substantive stakeholder engagement and participation in planning, priority setting, and solution implementation. Finally, Bill 180700 can serve as a model as my colleagues and as was said by actually everybody who's spoken today, not just for how we address the lead-related issues, but also for how we can better control the dangers posed by asbestos, mold, pest and rodent infestations, and other harmful indoor environmental conditions in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Tollenberger has a question for you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Roseman, and I want to thank the panel for taking up their time, and particularly Mr. Roseman for your time spent. I thought the briefing you gave last week to the council members was excellent.
Thank you.
Gave insight. But a question that I believe now, Ms. Mazur, it kind of comes from you, but I want Mr. Rossman to kind of answer it if he could, and that is as follows. You have said, a lot of the lead paint is coming from older schools. So the question I have for Mr. Roseman, can this actually be done? And second is the older schools are well built, generally, if they were cared for, and they add a character to a neighborhood, sometimes, not in every case, but sometimes it can never be done before. Do you think this is a practical solution in the sense of encapsulating or however we're going to remove this lead?
I do. I mean, we're sitting in a beautiful old building, and every time I come into City Hall, I'm impressed by these spaces. A lot of our schools are like that.
You could never build this again. You couldn't afford to do it.
That's correct.
The craftsmen that made it probably aren't even around.
That may be true. And so we have a lot of schools, the schools that we actually love, too, including Masterman and Central, these schools that are really beautiful and inspiring. They certainly are able to be stabilized, safe, and healthy, there's no question. And although we have a lot to do in the district, for sure, over many years, they can be done in a very efficient and cost-effective way. That really can be done that way.
One last really quick question. When do you think the last time that lead paint was actually used in our schools, where they actually put that on? They didn't know at the time. When do you think it was actually painted?
Well, I mean, after the late 70s, it was stopped. Okay. However, in reality, we probably still have a lot of that around and used. We find this occasionally.
Really?
But, it was formally stopped in the late 70s.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Roseman, thank you so much for your attention to this and also your work and effort, but none of this comes without advocacy, and Lori, your team, the parents, Healthy Schools, David, and Via Lead, and all the people who were hollering about trying to get something done and how can we codify it, and like you stated, an example, we can use this as a model for other things. This is not the end, and I think the school district sees that as we partner together. It's not one against the other. We need to work together to get this done. And do you see the added part that we put in about just not remediation, but how do we keep it clean until we get the time? Because we know we can't do this every job all at once, and the schools that need that. So do you see that the cleaning part and to keep these facilities clean and safe until we get to them as a big part of enabling safety in our schools? Yes.
Yeah, I think that, Lori and I think Dr. Howarth said this as well. It is the critical issue because to stabilize the buildings just for lead paint is going to take a year to 2 or 3. So each day, children are in these schools in these conditions, and the easiest way and the most direct way to deal with it is to vacuum up the dust, to not have the dust on surfaces where children can get access to them. The district has purchased specialized vacuum equipment that can be used for, and they know how to use that equipment and to wet, wipe, and mop surfaces. We just have to make sure that's done. So it is very doable, yes, and necessary.
Thank you, and I thought that was a big part of the legislation too, because I think initially, as you heard, people say, well, how are you going to do all this all at once? And we knew it was not an impossible task, but it would take a long time, and it's a big challenge. So to us, to keep it safe was the most important. And Dr. Howard, you had said earlier, not only the chipping, but the dust and the parts that are there in the school that aren't cleaned up create just as much as a hazard as the lead paint itself. And
That's true, absolutely. And young children have a lot of time on the floor. They do things on the floor, they roll around. But just large numbers of people walking through spaces that have a lot of dust on them actually resuspends things. And so, dust that had been on the floor is now on children's desks and on their books and things, and they take it home with them. So I think that it's really wrong to underestimate the dust itself as a contributor.
Thank you. And again, thank you all who testified, and we're going to hear some more testimony. But because of your advocacy and your passion for this is one of the reasons why this bill is on the table today and why we're collaborating and working with the school district to make our schools safer. So thank you all.
Thank you. So lastly, we have Nicole Girgenti, Don Anticoli, and Mads Lee. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Mr. Roseman? I'm sorry, Councilman, I did not
No problem.
recognize you. Councilman Green had a question for who?
Actually, Jerry Roseman is fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Roseman, if you mind. Councilman Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, thank you, Councilman Squilla, for your leadership in reference to your legislation regarding lead. I've also been working with the Philadelphia Healthy School Initiative for some time regarding not only the lead issue, but also asbestos and mold. And Mr. Roseman, you talked about the initiative, and also, we had participated in the press conference over the summer with the funding from Governor Wolf and the schools that were identified for lead removal. I know there are differences in the remediation efforts between mold, lead, and asbestos, but were there any best practices that were gleaned from that process with additional funding from Governor Wolf that we can use going forward as we look at this partnership with the school district to address some of the lead, asbestos, and mold issues that have been described in Councilman Squilla's bill as well as my bill regarding asbestos and mold?
Yes, I think that a thing to understand well is this is kind of a two-part problem. There's an immediate risk to children and staff every day. That risk comes from these environmental hazards, asbestos, lead, mold, and so on. Those hazards come from underlying problems. The underlying problems are challenging to fix. They take a long time, they take a lot of money, and we usually see them as capital improvements. The environmental hazards are easier to address in the immediate. Those fixes that we can do are temporary, but children are breathing and exposed on a temporary, everyday basis. So the kinds of cleaning efforts and the kind of preventive maintenance efforts that we have been talking with Danielle and district leadership about, and that your bill and Councilman Squilla's bill would be addressing, are very overlapping. So asbestos and lead are kind of controlled the same way in terms of the exposures on surfaces today. They both have the same element of needing more sustained fixes, but cleaning of those surfaces that have that is a major issue. Rodent and pest intrusion and infestation, and even mold is also benefited greatly by cleaning, because mold needs organic material, food, and it needs moisture. Those things would get addressed by some level of cleaning. And in addition to that is this preventive maintenance piece that can go a long way. So I think, yeah, it's a very efficient and very straightforward and very effective way to address these major issues and to make an enormous difference in very short order.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rosen. We will proceed. Ladies, I'm going to, oh, gentlemen. My apologies, Ed over there, Hazori, where is he? He reminded me he's Don's friend here. If we could proceed, I'm going to ask you to please be brief. We have 6 other bills, and we have folks patiently waiting. As you can hear, I mean, we're going to move forward on this, and we appreciate you weighing in on it. So thank you. You want to start, Don? Ed's friend.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Council Chair Colleen Sanchez, Mr. Swilla, and members of Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Dr. Don Anticoli. I'm currently serving as Secretary Treasurer of Teamsters Local 502 CASA, which is the Administrators Union in Philadelphia, the school district. We represent principals, assistant principals, facilities coordinators, climate managers, cafeteria supervisors, as well as school police sergeants, lieutenants, and early childhood supervisors. So we have a vested interest among everyone else with keeping our children safe. I'm not going to review all the exposure issues. We know that there are about 280 buildings in the school district and about 45 currently being remediated. We also know that from information from the Philly Healthy Schools that the issue of lead paint is widespread. And also my own experience includes work at Penn Treaty Middle School, which at the time middle school. One of the issues there was with the doors, which had been painted over 7, 8, 10 times. So Mr. Toppenberger asked about what had lead paint stopped being used. Yes, it was, but they hadn't stripped the doors and repainted. We also had asbestos issues that were being remediated. I also worked at Lincoln High School, a brand new building that had different types of issues, but they were being worked on. And currently Feltonville Intermediate School, which is where the children from Barton go after the K-2, they go grades 3, 4, 5. And that building was built in 3 stages, somewhere from the 40s to the 60s. And they also have issues with the doors, exterior doors, and flaking of the paint on the doors. So while it's an issue in the classrooms, there are also issues in other parts of the district. So Barton was remediated, but those children now come to Feltonville Intermediate for 3, 4, 5, and then they go to one of our newer schools, Feltonville Arts and Sciences, for grades 6 through 8. We also know it's hard to see exactly where the children are exposed to the lead dust, and we know it's very important for the cleaning issue, so we do appreciate the fact the district is hiring additional cleaners. We also realize that there needs to be supervision. Back in the day, as they say, there used to be an engineer in the daytime and nighttime. There was custodial assistant daytime and nighttime. But now sometimes there's only an engineer in the daytime. So when the folks are doing the work, we do request that they have the proper supervision. We also know that there are other long-term issues, such as the water leaks and roofing issues. When I was going through school, I actually worked in roofing and siding, and the rule there was you only put the roof on 3 times and patch it twice. So some of our starts at the top, so we really need to look at the roof issues, incursion of water, which impacts the asbestos and the lead paint. Also the brick pointing issues with the incursion of water. Water is a very serious issue, so we ask for help with that. And we also realize that the public may not realize the dangers exposed because you can't always see it. So we appreciate that Council Bill 180700 calls for better transparency and information to our parents and our communities. And we also want to make sure we realize that We appreciate council working with the school district as well as working with the state and the efforts so far. We know in the past few years, City Council has stepped up to the bar with funding for the school district, and the CAS appreciates that very much. We also know the state has stepped up. So we appreciate what you've done. We ask for your help with other conditions, including the asbestos, the mold, the pest issues, and other hazards. So we do ask that with this bill, while it's very important to have the notification and the issue, we ask for some funding that is dedicated funding, in other words, right directly for the facilities issues, and/or if possible, working with the school district to perhaps float some facilities improvement capital bond issues. I know the district bond rating has recently gone up a little bit, so maybe they can do some bond issue to help with the problem. But we appreciate the help, and we are here to support the issues going forward. Thank you.
If it's all right, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Mads Lay. I am one of Viet Lead's Civic Engagement Youth Coordinators. I'm here on behalf of our student leaders in Viet Lead. I am fairly new to Philadelphia and the work here. However, my time here within these past 5 months has given me a fairly large glimpse of the issues within the Philadelphia schools. Just within these last 5 months alone, I have heard countless experiences from our students about unbearably hot classrooms, leaking and collapsing ceilings, precautionary reminders about drinking water at school, ADA non-compliant buildings, and much more. Our students from Palumbo High School shared that, quote, when they're going to school, the last thing they want to worry about is if the ceiling is going to fall on top of them that day, which actually happened earlier this school year. Further, that morning, when the students anticipated to attend class, they were instead directed to the auditorium where they stayed for 5 hours until dismissal at 12:40 p.m. They were even notified by the principal that the school district expects them to follow by a full day schedule, end quote. It's evident that our students are both physically and mentally affected by these conditions. So why is it that these concerns remain unscathed? On the issue of lead, our students from Furness High School have been engaged in a prolonged effort to build a community garden, which has been stalled twice now due to the lead that we found flaking from old paint metal steps. We petitioned for it to be remediated, and it was. But then after the stairs were remediated, there was a fence left that still had lead. We again requested for the area to be addressed, including the fence, and now it is currently being addressed. Granted, after a year of organizing and advocating with parents, students, and teachers, the school district has responded positively. And for this, we are appreciative, very appreciative to Dr. Height and the building managers. And yet we have not seen the full plan to clean the lead and asbestos and other problems within the school. Our parents are also shocked by what we have been able to explain to them. Most of our parents have limited English proficiency and have not received any communications from their schools about what is going on, let alone in the languages they understand. Many of these parents are refugees and immigrants who have escaped from dire situations in their countries only to witness the toxic and deadly conditions that their children have to face. Our parents are demanding actions from the school board and oversight from City Council. Because of that, as a part of Viet Lead, we support Philadelphia Healthy Schools Initiative calls for transparency, accountability, and oversight on the process for lead and asbestos remediation across the school district. We support Councilman Mark Squilla's bill that calls for the aforementioned processes. In fact, Furness is a key neighborhood school within his district and would benefit from this oversight. While Viet Lead continues to fight for more dollars for our school district to be able to address this problem thoroughly, we recognize that every dollar for lead and asbestos remediation is precious and needs to be used in the most effective and efficient way. Our hope is that this bill will be an important step to support that effort. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You may proceed, Nicole.
I'll try to make it very brief. I'm here today as a community member and as a parent of a student at an elementary school. I'd like to thank City Council for hearing my testimony today. I just want to say that I'm simply here as I have deep roots in Philadelphia school systems. My grandmother went to Meredith in the 20s, graduated from Girls High. I have family members that went to public school all over town, and my parents and my siblings and I all graduated and went through school all through Philadelphia public school system. My son was now the 4th generation, just started kindergarten at Southwark this year. I became involved in, when I heard that the library was shuttered, got involved several years ago and tried to, we've been working and just have reopened the school library at our elementary school just this year. And because of my involvement in the school, I've had the opportunity to go on environmental walkthroughs with Jerry Roseman of PFT and of Philadelphia Healthy Schools Coalition. through those walkthroughs, I've seen the peeling paint, the asbestos, the rodent droppings, and the other health hazards that we're here to discuss today. And just to share that the parent side of it, I walk into school each morning to bring my kindergartner to the cafeteria to line up for the teacher, and my eyes go up every single morning to the lead paint that's on the ceiling, chipping right over the cafeteria tables where the children eat lunch. What should be a nice morning routine, for me is tainted with that view there. And most parents, I realize, have no real idea about the conditions of the paint or the other issues in our schools. Parents are not in the classrooms, they're not in the bathrooms, the cafeterias, they're not in the gymnasiums, and we don't know whether or not our children are being exposed to things that put their children at risk. Given this, I'm here today to support the bill, Bill 180-700, as a community member, as a parent. I'm realistic in knowing that it will take many years to fix the issues of all of our schools, buildings in Philadelphia, but in the meantime, we have to take responsibility and immediate action to keep our kids safe by ensuring no lead paint dust, chips, and debris is lying around to damage the health of our children. I hope City Council and this committee specifically will pass this legislation to help protect our kids from crumbling lead paint in our schools, to better involve parents, to better communicate with parents and teachers and other stakeholders in the process, and to ensure the best cleanup standards after the remediation work is done. Thanks for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you so very much. We appreciate the collaboration from the community and the school district. Councilman DeChico?
That's close, same nationality.
Frank owes me a drink because he's driving me crazy today. Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to say again, thank you guys for your advocacy and being there for the community and for the kids at the school. And Don, I heard about your red vest when you were a kid and you used to wear, and how sharp you are. But it's important to realize by advocating in this way and doing it in a positive way, we can get things done. And sometimes they say the squeaky wheel gets the oil, but it's important to know that the people who are out there advocating for this and making sure these things happen really help us as legislative officials to be able to do the right thing, and then to encourage the school district to also go along and do those things. And you can see these things happen because of your work. So it's really just a comment, and thank you for your help. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Squilla. For the record, I want to make sure that the councilman will submit Eugene from Bella Vista Neighbors' testimony that will be included as part of this. As we move, thank you all at the witness table. We're going to move to Bill 181008. I want to recognize Councilman Green. I know we have David Mazer, who is going to testify. As I mentioned earlier, the health commissioner submitted something in writing. We heard from Danielle Floyd. So before we take Mr. Mazer's testimony, Councilman Green, did you want to be recognized on the bill any further, or you want to wait till after him?
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you, Madam Chair. This is, as I said earlier, just a continuation of work that we've been doing with Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, as well as the school district, but also with Penn Environment, other parent groups and environmental groups, to focus on some of the issues and concerns we've had, not only regarding asbestos and mold, which are the subject of my legislation, but also lead, which is the subject of Councilman Squilla's bill. So I look forward to hearing the testimony.
Thank you. Is Mr. David Mazer still in the room? Okay. I'm going to ask you to please be brief. As you heard from the bill sponsor, it will be held, and there'll be a lot more work to be done on this, but we appreciate your time and wanted to make sure we got you on the record.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and thank you, members of City Council and Councilman Green, for introducing this legislation. I will make it short and sweet. Certainly at the Philly Healthy Schools Coalition, of which I'm a part, I'm a parent. My kids go to Southwark Elementary in South Philly in Councilman Squilla's district. And my day job is being the executive director at the statewide environmental group, Penn Environment, which is a citizen-based organization. Certainly, as we've heard over and over today, the issue of tackling environmental health issues in our schools is a top priority for parents, community members, teachers, principals, community members, the school district, and certainly City Council. And I think we look forward, particularly with the Councilman's bill, to hopefully emulate what we've been able to do with Councilman Squilla's legislation and sit down with the sponsor and representatives of the school district and health department to again reach an agreement on legislation that helps the district do its important work and puts our kids and professionals in the schools, make sure we protect their health. So I think this worked pretty well, as the councilman noted, and we look forward to working with those same stakeholders to reach a similar successful final piece of legislation. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time this morning and for your advocacy as a parent. We appreciate that. So the chair will now move on to bill number 180745. We have Rebecca Swanson from Licenses and Inspection. And Councilman Squilla, did you have anything to open up? No? Okay. Deputy Commissioner Michael Fink is also joining us.
We brought the brains behind the operation.
It's going to be a busy afternoon. Can we get through this?
You want me to get started?
Please do.
745, right?
We're going to, yes, 745, and then we'll do 746, yes.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Kiona Sanchez and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. My name is Rebecca Swanson. I'm the Director of Planning for the Department of Licenses and Inspections. Here to provide testimony on Bill number 180745, which revises the Philadelphia Fire Code and the Philadelphia Building Code to require fire sprinklers in portions of certain buildings. The bill will require fire sprinklers in buildings that are 5 or 6 stories, not already sprinklered, attached or have less than 5 feet between adjacent buildings, and have a commercial use or vacancy in the basement or first floors. This change will impact approximately 130 existing buildings, but only those that have not already installed fire sprinklers as part of a previous renovation. The building code already requires that all new and renovated residential occupancies of any height be fully sprinklered. The code also already requires that 7-story high-rise non-residential buildings be fully sprinklered. This bill is meant to guard against dangerous and disruptive fires in this type of building, many of which are historic and the majority of which are in the Old City and Spring Garden neighborhoods. The city has experienced a number of major fires in this type of building over the last 10 years, the most recent of which destroyed the historically registered building at 239 Chestnut Street. That fire resulted in the shutdown of that densely populated residential and commercial block for several months, causing significant disruption to the community. Requiring additional fire protection in these buildings supports preservation of historic buildings, reduces potential business disruption, and protects firefighters from the difficulty of fighting fires in these buildings. Overall, the enhanced fire protection required by this bill will benefit both the building owners and the surrounding community. It should be noted that federal tax laws allow for the deduction of costs for installing fire sprinklers, lessening the impact on the building owners. Building owners will have until January 1st, 2020 to install the required sprinklers. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Does the commissioner have anything to add to that?
No, Madam Chair, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Does anyone have a question from the committee? Councilman Squilla?
Thank you. And as we progress as we talk about safety, obviously the fire really brought to our attention in Old City how easy it is to spread without the proper safety equipment inside the building. Do you see if this was initiated earlier and the sprinklers were in these buildings that it would not have caused the same amount of damage?
After discussions with the firefighters who were working on those different sites, and there's been a number of those down in Old City area in the past 5 to 10 years. And the difficulty in fighting the fires is brought about by the close proximity. The other problem we have is that these fires tend to spread from a first floor basement area into occupied areas, because the basement and first floor are typically closed down late at night. So then when it gets to the residential areas, then that's when the alarms start to come in. So the fire is too far along, and too many people are at risk by the time it gets to that point. So what we're looking to do is to utilize the current building code, which does require sprinklers in almost every one of these types of buildings to be installed retroactively in about 130 different buildings throughout the city.
And is there a timeline to be able to do this for enforcement?
So we've added to the bill a proposed 3-year implementation period and opportunities for requesting extensions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions for these witnesses? Seeing none, we will now move to Bill 180746. In addition to Rebecca Swanson, we have a Peter Brennan from Urban Engineers, so I'm going to ask him to come up, and Rebecca, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Kiona Sanchez, members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. Rebecca Swanson, the Director of Planning for the Department of Licenses and Inspections. Here to provide testimony on Bill number 180746, which amends the requirements in the Philadelphia Property Maintenance Code for periodic inspections of piers and other waterfront structures. The code currently requires that owners hire an engineer to inspect their piers or waterfront structures every 3 years and submit a structural assessment to L&I. This requirement was developed in the year 2000 following the collapse of Pier 34 on the Delaware River, and it has not been updated since. This bill updates this requirement to add classification categories and to detail specific information that would be required in the engineer's structural assessment report. The bill also details the process that the owner and engineer must follow if the engineer's assessment identifies an unsafe condition. These changes align the requirements for pier inspections with those for the periodic inspections of fire escapes, building facades, and private bridges, all of which require a similar private inspection process. This will allow the department to process and review all private inspection reports in a consistent manner, which will lead to more efficient enforcement and hopefully increased compliance. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner, do you have anything to add at this time?
No, again, Madam Chair, I'm here to answer any questions.
Mr. Peter Brennan, you can proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of council, for the opportunity to speak on this matter. My name is Peter Brennan. I am the Deputy Practice Leader of the Ports and Waterways Practice at Urban Engineers. I specialize in the inspection, design, and construction of marine structures, and I've personally inspected a variety of piers in Philadelphia under the current inspection code. Between May and September of this year, my colleagues and I had the privilege of providing feedback to the City of Philadelphia's Chief Code Official on the proposed amendments now under consideration. I'd like to stress that we're grateful for the opportunity to consult, and we are satisfied with many of the proposed changes. However, we have serious concerns with the proposed revisions to the structural assessment ratings outlined in Section 314.3, and I'd like to publicly state our concerns for the record. The current assessment ratings match those outlined in the American Society of Civil Engineers Manual 130, which is the industry standard practice for the inspection and assessment of waterfront structures. We strongly believe that the Philadelphia Code should not diverge from this industry standard. We understand that the proposed revisions are intended to make the pier inspection assessment ratings mirror those of building facades and fire escapes, reducing the 6 existing ratings to 3, and essentially classifying piers as either safe or unsafe. On the face, a simplified, more uniform system of assessment ratings seems to make sense. However, the piers of Philadelphia are more varied and complex than fire escapes and building facades. Many were built over 50 years ago with drastically different engineering and construction methods, and it's rarely possible to inspect all of their structural elements. Attempting to narrowly assess the condition of such pier structures as either safe or unsafe is akin to assessing one's health as either healthy or dying. Such narrow assessments do little to aid stakeholders and may actually obscure the truth. Narrow assessments aside, the use of the term safe as an assessment rating is misleading. Safe implies an absence of risk. When dealing with Philadelphia's piers, many of which have outlived their original design life, were not designed or constructed with modern engineering methods, and have received a patchwork of repairs and modifications over their lifespans, there's always risk. Whether it's because they're buried in the mud or hidden behind a bulkhead, some critical aspects of these piers cannot be readily inspected. This is in contrast to structures like fire escapes and building facades, which are more straightforward to inspect. As such, even piers that exhibit no outward signs of distress, piers that would be assessed as fair or good under the current code, could suffer unexpected failures. This reality is at odds with how a layperson might interpret an assessment of safe. Everyone knows what safe means. It's a place you can bring your kids without worrying. In this instance, that understanding would not match the reality. The engineer determines the assessment rating based on the criteria of the assessment category, in this case, that minor or moderate defects were observed. However, the public might fixate on the assessment title and assume that the pier is absolutely safe, when in fact the engineer does not intend to make such an assertion. It bears noting that the term safe does not appear in the ASCE manual's assessment ratings. If the Philadelphia Pier Inspection Code is revised to use the term safe in assessment ratings, as is now proposed, my colleagues and I would feel the need to explain in our reports that the rating safe is merely a title. It does not imply any assumption or guarantee of safety, and only indicates that the observed conditions at the time of inspection correlate with the criteria listed under that rating. Essentially, we would make clear that we are not using the word safe as the public understands the term, which would cause more confusion rather than less, as we believe the proposed revisions intend. It is our position that public safety would not be well served by these changes in the peer assessment ratings. Thank you for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm a little concerned hearing your testimony, because I know firsthand that urban engineers is probably most knowledgeable about our peers in Philadelphia, based on their work over the several years. So what you're saying is the bill we have in front of us today, break it down as to how will we amend it or adjust it to give you a comfort level that it'll be good to proceed?
Thank you. As I said, I think most of the changes in the current bill we are satisfied with. It's really just this narrowing of assessment ratings down to 3 from 6 and basically classifying them as either safe or unsafe. I think my testimony speaks for itself, but as to my comfort level, I would be comfortable if we did not diverge from the national standard set by ASCE and stuck with those assessment ratings for waterfront structures.
And has L&I looked at these suggestions to make a decision?
Yes, Councilman. We've had numerous emails back and forth on this issue. What we did was, in the definition of safe, I understand his concern, but in the definition of safe, what we've done is incorporated the definitions of the 2 categories that we felt were narrowing down from 6 to 3. So in those 2 categories, the definition of safe reads, no visible damage or only minor to moderate defects or deterioration observed, but no overstressing observed. Structural elements may show very minor deterioration, but no overstressing observed. No repairs are required. Now this definition here is the new one, which replaces these 2. The current definitions are very good. No visible defects or deterioration observed. All structural elements are sound and performing their function. No repairs are required to accommodate the structure's current use and loading conditions. As a layman, if I were to read very good, I would assume that I'm safe, based upon how that reads. And when I read good, which is also being replaced, it says localized minor defects or deterioration observed. All structural elements are sound and performing their function. No repairs are required to accommodate the structure's current use and loading conditions. Again, as a layman, I would think that is good means safe, that I'm okay with that. The ASCE standard, in our opinion, is more detailed, and it can certainly be provided to an owner to get further details on the current condition of a pier. But in terms of the department's job in monitoring these conditions, we're looking to put them into larger buckets so that we can better control the activities that go on there. That's all we're looking to try to do. And the other thought that it does not apply to the same as facades and fire escapes. Bridges are also controlled the same way with these 3 categories, and I would consider them very complex structures as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just very quickly, Deputy Commissioner, you kind of answered this, but I think the key phrase as I'm reading Ms. Swanson's testimony is it would make these requirements consistent with the others, like fire escapes, building facades, and private bridges. It seems to make sense to me, that these things all, fit the same category generally.
That was our goal here. If you think about the thousands of reports that the department has to receive for all of these different items, we pretty much need to use a clerical or an electronic process for cataloging these things and making sure that we follow up on them. So we're looking to set them all up in the same format so that we can do our proper enforcement for those things that do require our immediate attention.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions for that panel? Seeing none, we will now move to Bill number 180953. A technical amendment has been circulated. There is a letter from the BIA in support of the legislation as amended, and I have Rebecca Swanson testifying.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Kiana Sanchez, members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. My name is Rebecca Swanson, Director of Planning for the Department of L&I. I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 180953 as amended, which amends the Philadelphia Building Code subcodes R, residential, P, plumbing, and EC, energy conservation. The residential code would be amended to include the amendments to the 2015 International Residential Code as published by the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. Philadelphia is required by the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code to enforce these requirements for residential construction. These amendments went into effect statewide on October 1st, 2018. The plumbing code would be amended to reflect the limitations placed by the UCC on the development of any regulations related to plumbing. The current Philadelphia Code authorizes L&I to develop the technical provisions of the plumbing code by regulation. In fact, chapters 3 through 16 of the current Philadelphia Plumbing Code are exclusively regulations and not found in the Philadelphia Code. The Law Department has recently advised L&I that recent case law requires that L&I needs codified direction on how such technical regulations may be developed. The amendments use language from the UCC and direct how technical regulations must be aligned with state code. The Energy Conservation Code would be amended to allow two state amendments in the 2015 International Residential Code that currently apply to 3-story homes to also apply to 4-story residential structures. This will greatly reduce confusion in residential construction, specifically around building envelope testing. The proposed amendments, which we request be adopted, correct technical and drafting issues and extend the sunset date for new regulations under the Plumbing Code to June 30th, 2020. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. Happy to answer any questions. Or Mike's happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? I want to thank the administration for working both with the BIA and the Plumbers Union. Look forward to closing out that conversation that's been going on for 11 years. Thank you very much. We move to Bill number 180992. I'm going to circulate over here for the purposes of the committee PHA data related to this, and we have Rebecca testifying.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Kiana Sanchez, members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. My name is Rebecca Swanson. I'm the Director of Planning for L&I. Here to provide testimony on Bill number 180992, which would amend Chapter 9, 3900 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Property Licenses and Owner Accountability. The bill would create an exemption for the Philadelphia Housing Authority and its subsidiaries from all licensing requirements and fees set forth in this section. Specifically, it would exempt PHA from having to obtain licenses for rental and vacant properties. The department is prepared to enforce the provisions of this bill should it become law. It should be noted that PHA currently is exempted from licensing requirements and fees and from permit fees under a long-standing memorandum of understanding, so this bill will not affect the department's processes or revenue projections. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel on this bill? Seeing none, thank you. We will now move to Bill 171112. I will note that as of now, we have 15 people scheduled to testify. I'm going to call the first panel. Well, let me start with Rebecca first, and the commissioner, and then I will call the second panel to the stand. So Rebecca, you want to get started?
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Kiona Sanchez, members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. My name is Rebecca Swanson, Director of Planning for LNI. I am here to provide testimony on Bill Number 171112, which amends the Philadelphia Fire Code to establish inspection and certification requirements for smoke control systems and smoke and fire dampers. I will first address the proposed changes to Chapter 9 of the Fire Code entitled Fire Protection Systems. This chapter currently requires periodic inspections, testing, and maintenance of all fire protection systems, with the exception of smoke control systems. This bill would add smoke control systems, which are fire protection systems that activate when smoke is detected and are required in buildings with large atriums, to this section. The department supports this change and the additional fire safety protection it will provide. The Fire Code already requires that a building owner perform operational testing of smoke control systems, but it does not require that proof of completion of such testing be maintained by the building owner, nor does it specify the qualifications of the individuals performing such testing. This bill would amend this chapter to require that the building owners both maintain on-site and submit to LNI forms certifying the inspection and testing of smoke control systems. In addition, the bill requires that the testing and inspection of smoke control systems be performed only by certain professionals. Next, I will address the proposed changes to Chapter 7 of the Fire Code entitled Fire Resistance Rated Construction. This chapter currently requires annual visual inspections of non-concealed fire resistance rated construction, which includes walls, partitions, fire stops, smoke barriers, and floors, among others, and repair any damage or deterioration. This bill would add an additional requirement that fire dampers, smoke dampers, and combination fire and smoke dampers, which are considered part of the building's construction and not an active fire protection system, in certain types of buildings are to be inspected and certified by certain professionals on a periodic basis. This certification would also have to be submitted to LNI. The department is prepared to enforce the provisions set forth in this bill should they become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Did you have a question, Councilman? The chair recognizes that Councilwoman Janie Blackwell, the sponsor of this bill, is present, as well as Councilman Heenan. Recognize Councilman Dom for question.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just my question, when was the last time a modern building fire damper failed in a modern building? I remember Meridian, I think, was one of them. Was that back in 2000? But could you tell me the last time this happened in Philadelphia?
The last time what happened?
Your name for the record.
The last time a failed fire damper was the cause of a loss of life or additional property damage?
Madam Chair, members of council, this is Michael Fink, from Code Official from License and Inspections. I don't believe any records. It has been alleged that the Meridian fire was subject to that, but the actual report for the Meridian fire says, and I quote, "The ultimate message delivered by this fire is the proof that automatic sprinklers are the most effective and reliable means at our disposal to protect high-rise buildings. When all other systems failed, automatic sprinklers were successful in controlling the fire."
So in a fully sprinklered building with an automatic fire alarm system and occupants which follow city-approved evacuation procedures, what value to life safety is the fire damper?
With any fire, there's the possibility of smoke. Sprinklers tend to contain that smoke to a more defined area. The dampers work to further contain that as part of a compartmentalization of the building, so you have rated floors, rated walls, rated ceilings. Any ducts that penetrate those rated assemblies would be required to have a damper there. In the event that there's a fire, smoke is detected, the damper drops and prevents the smoke from traveling elsewhere.
So let me ask you another question, because I always thought that sprinklers were number one in preventing fires. Is that not true?
Sprinklers are an active fire suppression system, fire protection system, and I believe they are the most effective, yes.
Okay. And then would fire dampers, just curious, that tragedy in 9/11, Remember the tragedy 9/11 with the World Trade Center? Fire dampers play any role in that terrible fire?
They actually weren't required to be installed in World Trade Center 1 or World Trade Center 2, but that report also says that they would not have helped in that situation because the actual fire towers were destroyed by the impact of the planes.
One last question. In the category of fires, life safety components, if we're picking 5 components, one being emergency generator, sprinklers, automated fire alarm system, automated sprinklers, occupant training, and fire and smoke dampers, how would you rank those 5 categories?
I don't know that I could rank them because they have different requirements and different occupancies in different areas of the code. I can tell you that the code in recent additions has eliminated the need for fire dampers in some locations when sprinklers are in place. But that's not to say that fire dampers and smoke dampers are not required in the code. Just like a rated wall may be required to maintain the compartmentalization, the idea that that wall still contains the fire for some period of time to allow for egress is still present in the code, and the damper is one element of that rated wall.
I have one more question, actually. In reading the bill, I want to make sure I understood the bill. The inspection of the fire damper systems, who would be doing that inspection? Would that be an outside party, or who would be doing that inspection?
The bill calls for that work to be done by sheet metal technicians, certificate holders, which are currently a license that the department issues, with additional requirements.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the purposes of the record, this has been an ongoing discussion for a long time. There was a study that was conducted. I want to thank the Commissioner Perry. It's been circulated to the entire committee, the consultant Travis Payton study and all the data that has been gathered that takes into consideration building age, residential, commercial, operational testing, contractor overhead efficiency, availability of floor plans, and all of the other related questions that have arisen. It's in everybody's packet for your information. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very quickly, in your responses to Councilman Dom's questions, I know you said with the sprinklers is maybe the best way to deal with fire, but I do hear that about how smoke often is the thing that kills people, because it's a smoke inhalation. And you said that sprinkler take care of a lot of that, but it sounds like the damper could be is it fair to say an additional safety caution?
The dampers, just like the rated walls, provide additional levels of safety, yes, sir.
So again, it might not be as far as rating, may not be the first, but it certainly could help. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, just keep in mind there are 2 portions to this bill. One is a smoke control system,
right,
which is an active fire protection system. That's where you'll find in Wells Fargo Center or the Kimmel Center or in shopping malls where there's large atrium spaces. When a sprinkler goes off there, actually a sprinkler probably won't go off because the heat never gets to that point. But it detects the smoke in those large atrium spaces, and then the system turns on. The other issue that we're talking about are dampers which are located inside walls and inside ceilings that just provide protection just like the wall, the floor, and the ceiling do. So the purpose of those is when ducts penetrate them, they keep the smoke or the fire from staying within that compartmentalized section. There's 2 sections of the bill.
No, I got you. But that damper it is a portion of the safety concern.
Just like the rated wall, it is a requirement in the building code, yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Chair recognizes Councilman Tollenberger.
Now, following your testimony, dampers and sprinklers working in tandem are then a very good way for suppression of fires and the safety of those that are in the buildings. Is that correct? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from our panel? Seeing none, I'm going to move to our next panel, Gary Massino, Brian Bush, Ken Wurst, and Joe Frick. After that, I have Vincent Delvatio, Mary Coffey, and then after that, I will have Ed Gross from the Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association, Jack Feldman from the Development Workshop, BOMA representatives Don Haas and Richard McClure, and then Jack Fairfield and Jensen Hughes. And I went through that exercise so that folks know we got a lot of people in waiting. After this panel takes all the time it needs, I'm going to ask people to be brief. You may proceed. Your name for the record.
Good afternoon,
Thank you
Madam
for your
Chairman.
patience.
My name is Gary Massino. I'm the business manager for the Sheet Metal Workers Local 19. I represent over 4,700 sheet metal workers in the greater Philadelphia area. I'm here to testify in strong support of Bill 171112, which was referred to as the Fire Life Safety Bill. I'd like to start by saying I'd like to thank the committee for being here today. I know you guys are busy, but this is a critical matter for our city. We call this the Fire Life Safety Bill, as we do, for a very good reason. It's because the reform of the bill, this bill will add to the city fire code, so are absolutely essential to protect human life in an event of a fire. In short, what the bill does is require periodic testing and inspection of vital fire safety equipment that exists in our city major buildings, and namely high rises. This equipment we're talking about is including fire dampers, fire smoke dampers, and smoke control systems. These are all part of the HVAC units and buildings, and if they are not subjected to regular inspection, there are no way of knowing if they'll work. We've been working on this bill with license and inspection now for the last 7 years. And it's been a lot of meetings and a lot of go around, and I feel this bill is a compromise on what we need. Right now, in the city of Philadelphia, we don't know when the next catastrophe is going to happen here. But we want to make sure that we do everything we can to protect the people in our buildings, our hotels, and our wherever they are. The inspection rules are put into, okay. Okay, these special. Okay. Basically, when the city adopted the fire code, it left gaps. This is one of the gaps that we're trying to fill now today. It does mention about fire dampers that it did not create any check and balance on who would be certified to inspect them dampers. Today, we're here to fix that. Pittsburgh has already made them same corrections to their fire code, and now has an active fire life safety ordinance where they do inspect their fire dampers and smoke evac systems, as well as numerous places all over the country, as well as Ohio. When a fire alarm goes off, it signals throughout the building. This causes the fire smoke damper to close to prevent a fire. So basically what happens is, as the fire starts, it fills up the building with smoke. Smoke travels at 100 to 150 feet a second sometimes, okay? In the MGM fire in Vegas, they said that building filled from first floor to the 20th floor in a matter of minutes with smoke. The smoke evac systems and the fire dampers totally failed in that fire. That was the origination of this bill that moves across the country now. 90 people died in that fire. In 9/11, that came up here earlier, while fire dampers weren't in the play there, it was the smoke evac systems that failed. And people found that they couldn't open the stairwells to get into the stairwell to exit the building because the stairwell's pressurized and they were stranded on them floors. Nobody knows how many lives would have been saved if the smoke evac systems worked. That was one of the main causes of a lot of deaths. It wasn't fire dampers, it was smoke evac systems. Upwards of 80% of people that are in fire related, up to 80% of the people that die in fire is related to smoke. It's 80%. The fire dampers are designed inside the HVAC system to stop the spread of smoke. The minute the alarms go off, or in some cases they're heat active, if there's a fire spreading through the ductwork, the linkages and the dampers will shut. They're like a series of garage doors inside the HVAC system to control the smoke and also control the feed of oxygen to the fire. And in some cases, when the alarms go off and the smoke dampers close, their units go into reverse and evac the oxygen and the smoke out of the building. So exactly what we're seeking here is to require mandatory testing to the fire dampers as it is in the NPF 90. I believe it's every 4 years. In hospitals, it's every 6. Failure to inspect this equipment will be a direct tie to cause an excess of injury and death. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't want to be the ones sitting and watching my TV one day as a high-rise building goes down, realize that the fire dampers and EVAC systems failed because we failed to inspect them. And who says 1, 2, or 100 deaths? I'll tell you, in the Meridian fire, 6 firemen died in that stairwell that night. It wasn't contributed to the fire dampers. It was contributed to the smoke EVAC systems once again, because that failed. Them 6 firemen roamed aimlessly in that building, trying to find a way out of there as the building filled with smoke, and ran out of oxygen and died in that stairwell, I believe. And the main cause, if that smoke EVAC system was working here, them 6 firemen would still be here today. Try to tell one of their families that this is not necessary. At this time, I would ask my counterpart, Brian Bush, to step in if he has anything to add.
Yes. How you doing? Brian Bush, Assistant Business Manager with Local 19 Sheet Metal Workers. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that were talked about earlier, about the sprinkler system, like Gary touched on. Yes, the sprinkler system does control the fire, but what controls the smoke? It's the fire smoke dampers. They act as a barricade. They close and they allow access to common areas where you can evacuate the building. Well, in a lot of those cases, which 9/11, the Meridian, we actually have contradicting evidence against what Michael Fink was telling you earlier. It actually mentions in the articles that it was faulty equipment. And it doesn't just say that it was the sprinkler systems. It was the fire alarms. It was also the dampers not closing correctly because, listen, what happens in these job sites, or in these buildings, I should say, even after the building is finished, just say it's a brand new building that just went up. All brand new fire smoke dampers and everything throughout. A couple months later, somebody comes through there, they're installing cable or something like that. They run it through these fire dampers sometimes. They run it through these openings instead of, cutting their own holes or whatever through the firewalls. And we've seen this happen numerous times. So that would definitely, stop the damper from closing. These are the reasons why we want the inspections done. The inspections, and not just inspections, but testing, because sometimes when you have a renovation or something like that, they'll screw studs to the side of the ductwork, not knowing that there's a fire damper in there, and it gets screwed shut or screwed through the side of the fire damper, and then when that goes to close, it gets trapped open. So there's a lot of different things that happen from the time that these fire dampers and fire smoke dampers are installed. And, we have other testimonies from instructors and contractors that can back this up, and we also have a demonstration to show you how quick it can happen, how quick a room can fill up with smoke. And listen, 80% of fatalities that are fire-related, 80% are from smoke inhalation. There's none of us can change the fatalities that have happened, but we can change them moving forward here today. So we ask you to support this bill. It's not for us. It's not just for sheet metal workers, like was mentioned earlier. It's more the qualified personnel that could come in and do this type of work is not just sheet metal workers. It's anybody that, has the experience and has the right qualifications to go in and inspect, test, and make sure that these systems are working. So we ask you today to support this bill with no amendments or anything else, just to move this thing forward. It's been going on way too long. It's been going on for 7 years now. Thank you.
Okay.
At this time,
Thank you. We're going to take Ken and Joe, and then we'll ask the panel for any questions.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ken Wurst. I'm the owner and president of Air Concepts Incorporated. I'm also president of the Sheet Metal Contractors Association of Philadelphia. SMCA is the local chapter of the Sheet Metal and Air Conditioning Contractors National Association, otherwise known as SMACNA. Our local association represents nearly 100 member contractors who install and service the exact fire life safety equipment referred to in this bill. I'm proud to say that our contractors' expertise in this field is second to none in this area. I am here today on behalf of SMCA to fully support passage of Bill number 171112, and I strongly urge the committee to take favorable action on this bill. As you've heard, this bill is designed to ensure that very critical fire life safety equipment in major city buildings are properly tested and inspected. Proper testing and inspection of these devices is absolutely essential for saving lives in the event of a fire. This equipment does two very important things when a fire breaks out. It contains fire and keeps it from endangering more people and property, and it helps control the spread of smoke, which, as was stated earlier, is critical because smoke causes over 80% of fire-related deaths. Simply put, if this equipment doesn't work properly, lives are put at risk, and there is simply no way you can ensure it works unless you conduct regular, periodic tests and inspections. This equipment works together with sprinkler systems and fire alarms to ensure that a fire is fought on all fronts. Fire alarms provide notification. Damper systems such as these provide prevention, and sprinkler systems provide suppression. Sprinklers work together with smoke and fire and combination dampers. They do not take their place. You would never buy a car without seat belts simply because it had airbags. They work together to save lives. My company has installed, serviced, and tested these devices for 25 years. Based on the results of that work, I can tell you that the need for standardized and mandated inspections is real, that the need to have those inspections done by trained and certified technicians is critical. As part of our work throughout the city, we have removed hundreds of non-functioning dampers over the years, and I shake my head and wonder why these devices are not inspected and maintained in buildings you would not believe. The bottom line is that this issue is a matter of life and death for the citizens of Philadelphia, its visitors, and its first responders. The bill before you offers a unique opportunity to save lives before they become statistics. I sincerely hope you seize the moment and make that difference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Joe?
Excuse me, one last thing. After our demonstration,
Can you just put your name for the record? Just
Brian Bush.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
After the demonstration, we would like someone to step forward and talk, just cover some talking points about the bill.
After Joe Frick?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. His name is Jerry Waits.
Excuse me?
Jerry Waits?
Yeah, that was just added on here, so you want to put him in front of, because you have other members, Vince Delvatio and Mary Coffey?
Just Jerry's just for questions.
Okay, all right,
Vince is just for questions.
okay. All right, so Joe Frick, because he's the one making the presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Joe Frick and Mary, right? Yeah, both. And Mary Coffey. For the record,
Gary, if you could stay here, because I think Councilman Tollenberger had a question, right?
Well, actually, for Mr. Bush.
Oh,
'cause
okay,
He raised the point.
All right.
Whenever,
okay.
I'm a-
So both, can Gary and Mr. Bush stay here and let
All right.
Mr. Frick and Jeffrey Waits come up?
All right, for the record, it's going to be Joe Frick and Mary Coffey providing a demonstration.
Okay, Jerry,
I'm Joe Frick.
sorry about that. Just for the folks who are waiting in the room, the Committee of Appropriations has been delayed. We said 3:30. We're going to try to get as close to that as possible. Thank you so much for your patience.
You're off. It's off. It's off.
might be right. Mr. Don, Councilman Don, you may do it.
We're not gonna have any sparks, right?
I'm Joe Frick. Just a quick demonstration on fire dampers. All this talk about fire dampers and smoke dampers. I just wanted to give you an example of what they are and how they function. All right, so here's a normally operating fire damper. Fire occurs in a building. The air temperature in the duct exceeds about 50 degrees above normal airflow. The fire damper melts a fusible link and this curtain drops. All right, when the curtain drops, that prevents the airflow from going through the duct, therefore preventing smoke and oxygen into the space. Sometimes when we inspect, we'll find that there are obstructions in the duct. Either somebody blocked it open or a cable has ran through the duct because it was easy access to getting from one point to another. When we inspect them, we're required to do a drop test. When we do a drop, hold on. All right, so I released the link and I do a drop test. It hung up because there was an obstruction in the duct. It could have been an electrician screwed something to the side, penetrate the fire damper, and it didn't work properly. All right, I'm sorry. It could be a carpenter doing...
For the record, we're not talking about electricity.
Any renovation work or tenant fit-out work could have caused this. Here we have a combination fire smoke damper. This damper is designed to fail close should the building lose power. All right, it is also designed that when it detects a fire, that it will open. So I'm going to use a lighter.
You guys promised me no fire.
All right, there's a detector on the other side here. I'm going to heat up the detector. So now detected a fire in the duct, and the damper is designed to close. All right, this one is designed to close. Others are designed to open during a fire. Okay, and also, I have to give it a second to reset itself. Okay, if I should lose power to the building, this damper will again close. Therefore, keeping the fire contained in the compartment. All right, just pull the plug. So you pull the plug and we lost power to the building, and now the damper automatically closes. If during an inspection, you're looking at all the linkage that's in this damper. There's a lot of linkage involved in here. Set screws holding different shafts together. There's linkage that hold the blades here that actually operate the blades. There's end switches that would be installed on here for the fire life system in the building, the alarm system. And just because they appear to be operating and the shaft is turning, it doesn't mean the damper's actually functioning. All right, the last demonstration is a demonstration on smoke elimination.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Coffey. This is a simplified version of a smoke control system.
On what?
What we have on my right, your left, would be a simulated stairway. And the bottom section is the fire floor. The objective of this fan on the side is to pressurize the stairwell and push the smoke, or keep the smoke from even migrating into the stairwell. So we do that by increasing the pressure in the stairwell versus any adjoining area. This fan up here, which I have blocked off with my phone so we don't get smoke coming into the room, this is the exhaust fan. We're going to remove the smoke, and it's called dilution. So we're going to dilute the space, remove the smoke, and exhaust it out of the building, at the same time pressurizing the stairwell. So I'm going to initiate the stairwell pressurization fan. This is bringing air in from the room here into the stairwell. And then I'm going to initiate the exhaust. And you can see where it's preventing the smoke from going into the stairwell. And then we're exhausting any smoke that was on the fire floor. And it gets a bit more complicated because we have to, in real life, we have to control the pressure in the stairwell because the doors on a stairwell open in. From the fire floor, they open in. So we have to keep this pressure under control to such a point where a person can open the door. If the pressure difference between the stairwell and the fire floor went to even as much as an inch, you're talking about possibly having to move about 108 pounds of pressure against that door. So it's important that we also monitor and maintain the pressure within the stairwell to make it functional for a normal person to open the door.
Thank you. Wonderful to see a woman involved in this. Councilman Tollenberger, you had a question?
I do. I actually have
I'm sorry, are you finished, Mr. Frick?
I just wanted to make
I have
one more
questions
point
for Mr.
that
Frick now.
Okay.
with the pressurization of the stairwell and with the pressures that Mary was describing here, this is our life safety system that is going to protect the occupants so that they can get out of the building safely. We have to keep these stair towers clear of smoke. And that's one of the main points that strike home here. You know, the smoke dampers save lives, as well as the first responders that come to the building.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Tollenberger. You want Mr. Frick first or Mr.
Yeah,
Bush?
Mr. Fricky's standing up and he's
Okay,
ready
Mr.
to
Frick,
answer,
the
I
question is
believe.
going to be geared at you.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. A couple things. The loss of power, you said, closes the dampers. Is that any loss of power, or how does that work? I mean, let's say the other day we lit the Christmas tree and it was a wonderful thing, but yet I don't know how to explain it. Every directional traffic light around City Hall went out. Now, I'm not sure if they're related or not. My point is, if something like that were to happen, the dampers close, is that correct, or not?
If there is loss of power in the building, and the source of that power is also the source that controls these dampers, yes, the dampers
But it has to be
close.
then together. It cannot
Yes.
be because of something
Yeah, it's
outside.
not, if
outside
someone
the building.
blows a circuit in a room, you're not going to lose your smoke damper.
Gotcha,
It's not going to close.
gotcha. Then,
Yeah.
once power comes back, I guess, or the matter is done, the dampers then automatically rise again, or no?
It depends on what the situation is. If we have a fire, if there's a fire that causes the loss of power and the damper closes, if the power comes back on and we're still in that fire smoke mode, no,
Right.
the damper's
They will
not going to
rise.
open.
Okay. All right, and the other question, Mr. Frick, I think part of the first part of this demonstration, you said something is activated, I believe, by heat where it drops down? Is that correct, or am I incorrect on that? The very first thing.
Yes, on the fire damper that I first had up here,
Yes,
there's a fusible link.
fusible link, and what's
Fusible
that?
link, and that link is made up of an alloy that is designed to melt when the air temperature in the duct gets 50 degrees above its normal value.
50 degrees.
So if you have
outside.
135-degree air going through the duct,
Right,
at 185 degrees, it will melt.
and then it's closed.
And they match them up based on the temperature that travels through the duct.
Okay, okay. All right, and Mr. Bush, if I could, hi. You had described something where someone from another trade, I won't use any other trade, were to hook something into the vent, or run something through the vent. I think that's the first thing you said, either run a wire through the vent or hook something to the vent where it obstructs the damper.
Yes, yeah, we've seen that numerous times. I mean, I used to see it all the time,
it's-
just going into job sites. After, like I said, after the building was completed, and just say a few months down the road, they decided to renovate, or
Right.
you had somebody else moving in there, You never know who's going to do the work.
And they may have, that's correct, and maybe
You know?
for expediency, they say, oh,
Exactly.
this goes pretty neat, let's get out of here, we gotta move to the next
It could be
job.
the cable company, or in this case, it could be Local 98.
All right, my question,
Just kidding. No, but normally
do
we
not
wouldn't
pickle
see
my
that.
colleague, Councilman Heaton.
Well, listen, like I said, you don't know who's going to come in there and do the work. It could be some fly-by-night guy.
I understand.
It just happens. you
My
know?
question, now that we have set that up, my question is that currently, if that is to happen right now, is that a violation of L&I?
What, for them to come in there and just run it through the?
Yeah, run it through,
Yes.
or it is currently also a violation
Yes.
as we speak? Okay. That's my, is there, would you be aware of what the fine would be, or not? If you're not, it's okay.
No, I have no idea.
But it's definitely a violation.
It should be a violation. In my opinion, it should be $10,000 fine.
Well.
But that's my
Might
opinion.
take that into consideration. Okay. Mr. Bush, thank you very much, Madam Chair, I am finished.
Thank you. All right, any
Yeah,
other
real
questions?
quick, actually, because there's no inspections being done now, you wouldn't find that, so.
Understood, yeah,
That's why we want to start doing this.
so you wouldn't discover it unless you had an inspection?
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bush.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Again, we have Vince, and then, well, Mary was just included. Okay. Again, I'm going to ask you to abbreviate. I have 4 more panelists, and I promised appropriations, where I think we have almost every city department here. We'd get done at 3:30. Thank you for your patience.
Liaison.
Vince?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jared Waits. I'm counsel for the Local 19 from the law firm of O'Donoghue and O'Donoghue. I'm actually the last witness, so the other ones were here for just technical questions. I will try to be as quick as possible. We do appreciate your time. This is important. I think the past witnesses did a good job on showing the practical nature of this bill and the vital need that's involved for the inspections that it calls for. I just want to address 2 points that I think will give you some information that you want. One being the legal legislative need for the reform, and 2, certain public policy evidence to underscore why there's a clear and compelling need for it. I will say for the record at the outset that when those dampers get stuck, that wouldn't happen with a union electrician, I should say for the record, because it would be done right the first time. And that's what this bill's about. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons and doing it properly. What's happened here is that you have certain gaps in your code, in the city code. The fire code is basically written by professional engineers at a national level. They've come up with a whole system of inspections and testings that goes through the state government, comes down to the city government. Along the way, certain gaps are created, and I think L&I acknowledged this in their testimony. There's some references to these types of things, but there's a number of serious gaps, especially as when and how often these inspections are done, who they're done by, what kind of qualifications of the people doing them are, and very importantly, the need for reports to the city to document that they have been done, so you don't find these problems. And that's what this legislation does. It closes those gaps. This is not an unusual situation. This is, code stuff gets very complicated, as you know, and what happens along the way is you find these problems. Pittsburgh had the same problem that corrected like 2 years ago, 2 years ago. In our written testimony, we have over a dozen other examples of jurisdictions that had to do these same kind of corrections. We thought it would help for you to know that. And the other thing is I wanted to say at the outset, and I don't have much more after this, a couple more points. We looked at the testimony of the few groups that are opposing this bill, and they're concerned with cost, which is understandable because all safety measures have cost factors. And they make an argument that this is not necessary because the incidents where this equipment is needed would be remote, quote, and that's the language that they use. I disagree with that language. I will admit this happens infrequently. Fires happen infrequently. The problem is, when it happens, if you don't have this, God help you, you're the person there and you don't have this protection. We see this all over, and all kinds of reforms for public safety cost money. It's just a fact of life. Whether it's protecting children from lead paint or lead in the water, or it's ensuring that elevators operate safely or airplanes operate safely, we have to take various measures. Elevators are a good example. We have a regimen, a tight regimen of inspections for elevators. And people rarely fail and people rarely get hurt. When they do, it's very serious injuries and death. But one of the reasons that the injuries are rare and the failures are rare is because there's a very tight regimen of inspection to make sure the equipment works. This is man-made equipment. It's not, some divine intervention. It's man-made, it's mechanical, it fails. Right now, the way it is in the city is this stuff could have been put in 10, 20, 50 years ago, and it's never been looked at. And God help you if you're in the building and a fire occurs and that damper or the smoke doesn't work as they just demonstrated. That's what this is about. And if you take away those protections, whether you have it in elevators or electrical systems or in these HVAC systems, you are, in this case, literally playing with fire. And that's what we're doing is we're putting the inspections that were supposed to be there all along by the top experts in the country that say these need to be here and putting them in and making sure they're there and they work right and do their job. Now, if you need anything else beyond that, all you have to do is look at the headlines, some of the biggest headlines from fire tragedies that we've seen. And, we found several where there's a dead-on connection between the lack of this equipment or the failure of it and increased death and harm. You can look right at 9/11, the federal government, the U.S. Fire Administration, and I have 3 quick examples and we can wrap up. The federal government, through the U.S. Fire Administration, found that the absence of fire dampers in mechanical supply systems and return ducts at shaft penetrations on each floor was a major concern. Nationally recognized model building fire and mechanical codes have contained requirements for fire dampers in these locations for many years. The installation of smoke detection in these locations was an ineffective substitute for protecting the integrity of these barriers. Smoke alarms, fire protection, fire sprinkler systems are tremendous, absolutely critical, but they put out the fire, they don't stop the smoke, which kills 80% of people, as you heard, in these incidents. Next, you go to the Meridian fire that happened right here in Philadelphia. We had similar issues with direct connections of not sufficient equipment and it not working. And then you can go back to where some of these regulations started was the MGM Grand Fire in Las Vegas. This was many years ago, but Councilwoman Blackwell was actually at the hotel at the time, which was when our guys talked to her. It was just an amazing coincidence. She was there. At that incident, 85 casualties, 79 were caused by smoke insulation. And a point-blank finding by the federal government again, fire and smoke dampers did not operate properly. The evidence really is overwhelming. There's a clearly compelling need. All the top experts say we need to have this. If you don't, you're taking serious chances, wrong types of chances, and wrong types of exposure and jeopardy to public health.
Thank you. Any other questions from the panel? Councilman Don?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to make sure I understand the bill in front of us. You're suggesting that periodic testing of smoke control systems shall be performed by a sheet metal systems technician certified by the Department of License and Inspections, okay? Most inspections, though, aren't they usually by a third-party licensed engineer?
No, you have elevator tests done by elevator mechanics and also certified inspectors. There's often a tag team. In this case, it's certified contractors as well as certified technicians. You have to have people who know the equipment, so there's different systems, so it's not, did you want to add?
If I may.
Sure.
Vince Stavaccio, I'm a retired sheet metal worker, a retired tab contractor, which is testing, adjusting, and balancing. I'm also an SME, a subject matter expert. I'm on a panel of people that write the questions, that certified people to do this, do testing and balancing, fire, life, safety 1 and 2, many other things. No, we are the ones that do the physical testing of it. As a testing and balancing technician, starting 40 years ago, we go into a duct system and find fire dampers wired open. They had failed, the link had failed, somebody wired them, I'll be back later to put a link in. They never did. Over the years, I probably came across 100 instances where either a combination of fire smoke or fire damper had failed, it could never close because of being wired up, because of a brick or a block being in there, or a piece of wood. At least when they used the brick, that was non-flammable. So it does happen. As far as third-party and sensors on computers, the only thing a computer tells me is that there's a signal coming back. 2 weeks ago, a Boeing MAX 737 plane crashed, and it was caused by a sensor failure. And I can't think of a sensor more complicated than one put on a plane. Something to sense whether a damper is open or closed is a $20 limit switch, which can fail or not work properly very easily. One more thing, 54 weeks ago, 4 people died approximately 20 miles from here in a sprinkled building because sprinklers didn't work at the Barclay Friends home in Westchester, Pennsylvania. There are no 100% fail-safes, but when it comes to testing, fire dampers and combination dampers, you need hands-on, eyes-on verification that these systems are functional.
I want to get Rebecca on the record just for the Councilman Dom's clarification that we have a certification process that's outlined, right? Can you just set that, because that's in place now, and it is something that's been agreed to in the past. Either one, just for the record, because
Rebecca Swanson from Illinois. Yes, there is a test administered by the International Co-Councils for sheet metal worker technician.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Can I add one more thing? Our technicians are also certified by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. All the questions that this panel I've been on for years, we have to write questions a certain way, everything has to be developed according to their standards. So we are the only certification agency in the country that has ANSI certification for those.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to this panel. Again, I'm going to call the last panel, and again, I'm going to ask folks, I know everybody's been waiting patiently. I have Ed Gross from the Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association. We do have written testimony from him. David Feldman from the Development Workshop, where we also have written testimony, and we have BOMA represented by Don Haas and Rich McClure.
Excuse me, Councilwoman, thank you. We would just like to let you know we'll be glad to clarify any confusion or questions from the next testimony as well.
Yes, I will make the committee fully aware that both from the union's perspective as well as from the BOMA perspective, people are open to meet individually folks to clarify anything.
Thank you.
Over the next couple of weeks. Thank you. All right, folks.
All right.
Yes, go ahead, Ed.
Good afternoon. My name's Ed Gross. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association, which represents over 90 hotels around the region, including all hotels in Center City and most within Philadelphia. I'd like to thank Councilwoman Quinona Sanchez and the Committee on Licenses and Inspections for this opportunity to testify on Bill number 17 1112 regarding the inspection and testing of fire dampers and smoke control systems. As an organization, the Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association has long advocated for meaningful life safety measures that will ensure the welfare of our guests and our employees. That being said, the Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association cannot support Bill number 171112 as it is currently written. Testing and inspection of fire dampers would be burdensome to hotels and our guests. Most of the work associated with this testing and inspection would need to be performed in our occupied areas, and as you know, a hotel never sleeps. Our hotels follow the industry best practices, and our current life safety measures provide superior protection to our hotels and guests. We are fully sprinklered and have automated smoke detection systems. Given the current levels of protection already in place, we are confused as why there is any consideration to again making running a hotel even more expensive than it is now. We have struggled to find any statistics on damper failures or incidences where a failure of these devices has exacerbated an event. We do not need a solution for a problem that does not exist, and so our association does not see the value proposition in this legislation. The extremely high expense to comply with this is out of proportion with the low return on improving safety. We believe there are far greater opportunities to fund initiatives that truly increase the safety of our hotels, employees, and guests. There are nearly 1,700 hotel rooms in Philadelphia, employing 11,000 people, 80% of whom are Philadelphia residents living in every neighborhood of the city. Increasing the cost of hotel operation will have a negative impact on every one of those employees. Before you vote on this legislation today, I respectively ask you to consider all the facts. I hope you arrive at the same conclusion. This is special interest legislation with no value to the public. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next.
David.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Colleen Sanchez, members of the Committee on License and Inspection. Thank you for hearing testimony of the Development Workshop today on Bill number 171112 regarding inspection and testing of fire dampers and smoke controls. I serve as the Executive Director of the Development Workshop, which you're familiar, saving you time. And we stand alongside BOMA and other members of the Philadelphia Real Estate Coalition in opposition to this legislation and ask that the bill be held today. As stated by you will hear from our colleagues at BOMA, automatic smoke detectors, dampers are already inspected as part of required annual fire alarm certification. This legislation would create an additional layer of redundant testing and take work away from area fire alarm contractors that already perform this work. Philadelphia already has some of the highest construction costs in the nation. This, coupled with high wage and business taxes, high commercial property taxes, high use and occupancy tax, fuels the narrative that Philadelphia is not a friendly place to start, relocate, or grow a business. The legislation only furthers this narrative by forcing building owners to spend tens of thousands of dollars per cycle on a redundant inspection that does not substantially increase the safety of the tenants. We would be amenable to this if amended to exempt buildings to meet the following criteria, however. 1, that the building is fully sprinklered. 2, the building has automatic smoke dampers with position feedback monitored by a fire alarm system or a building automation system. And 3, that the trades that are presently performing this work in hospitals for a minimum of 5 years be grandfathered under the regulation. We'd also like to point out that while smoke deaths are a high cause, over about 2/3 of all fires happen in 1- and 2-family houses, which obviously don't have smoke dampers. And that City Council, much to its credit, after the Meridian Fire in 1991, where 3 firefighters were tragically killed fighting the fire, and that enacted safety regulations that have kept us, thankfully, from having any major incidents that would cause these additional. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on, folks. Let's get through this. If not, we're going to be here longer. It'll
Keep
be
it
good
as quick
evening.
as possible. Thank
Yes,
you.
Don. Come
My
on.
name is Don Haas, and I'm here today with Rich McClure. We manage high-rise office buildings in Center City, and are here today as our capacity as the Government Relations Co-Chairs for the Building Owners and Managers Association of Philadelphia. We'd like to thank Councilwoman Sanchez and the Committee on L&I for this opportunity to testify today. As a point of reference, BOMA, Philadelphia, is a not-for-profit organization whose members provide over 117 million square feet of workspace in and around the tri-state area. We have over 200,000 occupants in our buildings in downtown Philadelphia alone. We'd like it to note at the outset that the bill today would impact not only commercial office buildings, but residential units, apartments and condos, hotels, hospitals, and possibly universities. BOMA and its member buildings take life safety issues extremely serious. As an organization, BOMA has long advocated for meaningful safety measures that will ensure the welfare of our tenants, their employees, and visitors. Significant advances such as sprinklers and building facade inspections had our full support. That being said, BOMA Philadelphia cannot support Bill number 171112 as it is currently written. By way of background, the majority of fire dampers are installed as best practices and many are no longer required by code. If these devices are properly installed by trained labor and tested immediately after installation, the potential for failure is extremely remote. Furthermore, with buildings today being fully sprinkled, the likelihood of heat rising to that level that would cause the damper to activate is also remote. From a practical standpoint, testing and inspection of fire dampers would be unduly onerous on building owners, managers, and the tenants alike. Most of the work associated with this testing and inspection would need to be staged from tenant spaces during off hours. Furthermore, many of the dampers located at the point of supply and return are extremely difficult to access. The vast majority of these dampers installations afford a visual means of inspection only. While there are small access panels for visual inspection, the ability to drop a damper and reset it is cumbersome at best. The reality is this process is extremely difficult and may require multiple individuals to drop and reset without causing damage. As a component of the building fire alarm system, automatic smoke dampers are inspected as part of our annual fire alarm certification. As currently drafted, this bill would add an additional and redundant layer of testing that would take work away from the already certified fire alarm contractors. Additionally, many of those dampers have automatic feedback via the fire alarm system. Given the current state of life safety measures that are already in place throughout the city, BOMA would like to pose the following questions. Why is damper testing and inspection being raised as an issue at this particular time, and by who? We were respectful of the other people when they were testifying. We did not interrupt. We expect the same. You have in your testimony at least a half a dozen inaccuracies we did not correct.
Continue.
Should we continue with the abuse?
I apologize. Continue with your testimony.
No. We were extremely respectful, even with at least half a dozen inaccuracies, such as 6 firefighters at Meridian. Evidence to support this proposed legislation appears to be extremely lacking. What is the failure rate on these dampers and what losses are increased due to their failure? The incidences are extremely low. We might then ask whose interest is it to support this legislation? Life safety is a central part of our industry. BOMA Philadelphia fully endorses those life safety measures that will help protect and promote the safety and welfare of our tenants and their employees and visitors. The life safety measures, such as those proposed by this bill, however, are out of sync with the wider industry standards and over and above the national model codes that appear to promote the interests of a particular trade industry. BOMA Philadelphia suggests that it's time to review these proposals carefully and publicly. The bottom line is, the testing and inspection required by this bill would not significantly raise the life safety standards already in place. BOMA would like to reconsider BOMA Philadelphia would like reconsideration its position if it was revised to include the exemption for buildings with a fully sprinklered, automatic smoke detectors, and automatic fire alarm system. And of course, the people who have already been doing this work at the hospitals to be grandfathered. At this juncture, I'd like to turn the mic over to Rich McClure, my fellow co-chair.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez and members of the License and Inspection Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony today. As Don mentioned, my name is Rich McClure. I'm his fellow co-chair at BOMA's Philadelphia's Government Relations Committee. Over the years, we've had the privilege of working with many of you, either in our efforts here at City Hall or through BOMA's philanthropic efforts giving back to the community. We have renovated many PAL centers throughout the districts in the city. In fact, we're just starting another renovation in Strawberry Mansion section of the city. It's a true labor of love for our members, but that's not why we're here today. Before you vote to potentially advance this legislation, we ask that you stop and think about the following. If you are truly concerned about life safety, is this a technology in which you would invest time, energy, and capital? Fire dampers are considered passive technology. In today's modern buildings, owners are investing in prudent, active life safety measures, sprinklers, state-of-the-art fire alarm systems, up-to-date training of the building occupants. While passive technologies were required in earlier versions of the code, modern codes are focused on active approaches to life safety. There is no doubt that early detection by fire alarms and protection afforded by sprinkler systems are what truly can save lives. The ICC and NFPA, which are model code and standards recommending bodies, are designed as a consensus process. All relevant stakeholders participate in the vetting and rulemaking process and ultimately vote on recommendations for industry construction and safety standards. At no point do they recommend which trade or group should complete work. We suggest that proposed legislation in making such a recommendation would contradict this well-thought-out and highly regarded process. This or similar legislation has been introduced on and off for about 7 years. We have invited the organization requesting this legislation to meet with us, but that invitation has gone unanswered. We are concerned by the apparent unwillingness to entertain other points of view on this topic. Let me be clear, BOMA members are among the largest consumers of sheet metal workers' labor here in the city. We value their contributions to the business sector, and yet the proposed legislation, which places significant and unnecessary burdens on our members, is questionable at best. Being perfectly clear, BOMA Philadelphia's position is not new. Immediately following the introduction of this legislation, we shared our concerns with the sponsors. We appreciate Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez's role in listening with an open ear and attempting to seek a compromise. In fact, we had proposed several amendments which provide relief to those who have invested in active technologies, and equally important, provides incentive to those who have not yet done so. As you read this legislation carefully, we ask that you identify whether there is a true need for it. We have repeatedly asked those involved to identify when and where these devices have failed in a commercial high-rise building, resulting in a loss of life and or major property damage. We are here to identify, we are unable to identify a single case. The group requesting this legislation has shared anecdotal information about situations that occurred more than 30 years ago. Needless to say, we are in a much different place today. Advances in automation and fire alarm technologies, as well as installation and sprinkler systems in buildings, have improved life safety dramatically. Pointing to the Meridian Fire in Philadelphia and the MGM Fire in Las Vegas, both which occurred more than 30 years ago, and both which occurred in buildings lacking sprinkler protection, is misleading. It was not lack of fire dampers or failure of the same which caused the rapid spread of fire in those instances, but the lack of active fire suppression and sprinklers to contain the fire. In fact, the U.S. Fire Administration technical report indicated that the primary means of fire spread in the Meridian Fire was through failed windows. Pointing to the loss of the Twin Towers on 9/11 is simply unconscionable. Regrettably and sadly, given what we know today about those tragic events, nothing could have prevented the loss of life. If you examine this issue objectively, we're confident that you will agree with us the effort behind this particular piece of legislation is completely misplaced. The loss of life associated with fire in the city is occurring in single-family and row homes, not in buildings targeted by this bill. BOMA has always promoted prudent life safety measures. The expanded testing of these antiquated devices, however, is not prudent expenditure of resources. To underscore this, Don and I both recently completed projects investing a collective $1.7 million in making modifications to fire alarm systems. This is not because we or our owners were mandated to do so, but because of the interest in ensuring that our assets possess the most state-of-the-art life safety systems. Ultimately, this is the best interest of our tenants, their guests, the public at large, and at the end of the day, prudent for our building owners and investors. As Don shared, the requirements sought by this bill exceed what our insurance carriers are seeking. Think about it. If insurance companies really saw this as a true risk and concern, they would be driving this effort, not the group standing to benefit by its passage. As Don shared in his testimony, the requirements of this bill would impact tenant operations throughout the city. In order to get the requisite access and perform the required work under this bill, individual workers would need to be relocated, office furniture would need to be disassembled, and the resulting disruption to tenant operations and inefficiencies for which there is no tangible statistics demonstrating the need. Last but not least, there is the financial impact to be considered. The independent estimates secured by L&I project the cost for a 600,000 square foot office building would approach $90,000. Carrying this across BOMA's membership would have a minimum material impact in excess of $6.6 million. Again, BOMA asks that you consider our testimony before voting today. We ask that you think about true life safety, and we trust you will come to the same conclusion we have. Today is not the day, today is not the time, and we ask you to vote no for Bill 171112, or minimally have it held in this committee. Thank you, and we stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Dodd for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Here's my question, very simple. If this can save lives, which would be great, you mentioned insurance companies. Has anyone, either BOMA or the sheet metal workers or L&I, has anyone done an analysis to see what the cost savings would be from the insurance company side once these dampers are inspected every year?
Again, it's not even on the radar, so they're not going to then value that as a savings to us on a premium.
Have we reached out to them to ask
I
them?
have. One of the very major insurance carriers.
Well, I'm going to give the sheet metal workers the same opportunity to answer that question. Can you come up to the front?
Okay.
The question was, have we talked to insurance companies? I'm not aware of.
Your name for the record.
Jerry Waits.
By the way, my goal is to get you all guys together so you can figure this out. But go ahead.
I think the question was, have we talked to insurance companies? I don't think we have. What I would tell you, as an attorney, if I was an attorney for the insurance company, there's enough in the code right now that says this equipment, it says it should be maintained, it mentions inspections, and it says some other things. What it doesn't do is say you should do it 4 times a year, every 4 years, excuse me. Every 4 years, which the International Fire Code specifies. It fails to pick that up. And it doesn't require that you document it and submit it so the city knows what's exactly going on and what's not going on. So, but I can tell you there's enough right there, right now, that if I was a lawyer for an insurance company, as soon as a fire broke out, I'd be looking at the city code and I'd be looking at a way to disclaim coverage because there's probably enough there.
So again, that would account that
Can you
Don Haas, BOMA, that would take into account that the fire damper had a failure which contributed to the fire, which has not been proven.
Well, I disagree. It's not been proven. We cited reports from Meridian, from 9/11, where they said it was a factor that this equipment was...
Folks, we are clear that both of you do not agree. I want you to direct your statement back to my council colleague.
I hear you. I'll tell you what would be helpful to me after this, if someone would contact an insurance company, both sides, submit it to the chair. I'm curious to see how they would interpret it as far as premiums are concerned for people that own these buildings. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Any other questions? This concludes our public hearing of the Committee on Licenses and Inspection. We will now go into our public meeting for the purposes of the motions. Let me remind folks that both from the perspective of the bill sponsor as well as BOMA and the unions, we continue to encourage further conversations, but we will take action today. So the chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee for a motion on the amendments to Bill Number 180700, 180953.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm going to ask for people's cooperation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the amendments to Bill Number 180700 and 180953 be adopted.
All those in favor? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any oppositions? Seeing none, the amendments to Bill 180700, 180953 are adopted. The chair asks for a motion on bills number 180700 as amended, 180745, 180746, 180953 as amended, 180992, and 171112.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Bill Number 180700 as amended, 180745, 180746, 180992, 171112, and 180953 as amended be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of these bills at the next session of council.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, the bills as presented by Greenlee will be moved out of this committee with a favorable recommendation and duly noted amendments with a rule suspension to permit first reading at our next session. For the record, Bill Number 181008, 18107 are being held at this committee to the calls of the bill sponsor. Thank you very much. We need to give our stenographer 15 minutes, and then we will resume to the Committee on Appropriations. Thank you all.